What happens when this man you're falling for wants to destroy your own brother? When Lydia Everhart discovers that Rowan Blackthorne, the disgraced duke she can't stop thinking about, has returned to London with one deadly purpose, she faces an impossible choice: family loyalty or brutal truth. But in a world built on lies and power, the real question isn't who to trust, it's whether anyone deserves saving at all. Stay until the end to see how one woman's courage changes everything. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from. The rain came down like nails on the cobblestones of Mayfair, turning the streets into rivers of black silk that reflected the gas lamps in trembling fragments. Inside the Ashford townhouse, the chandeliers blazed with 1,000 candles, and the ballroom hummed with the particular kind of noise that only London's elite could produce. Laughter that didn't quite reach the eyes, gossip delivered in honeyed tones, the rustle of silk and the clink of champagne flutes held by hands that had never known a day's honest work. Lydia Everhart stood near the terrace doors, watching the rain streak down the glass, and wished she were anywhere else. "You look positively murderous, darling." She turned to find her cousin Charlotte at her elbow, resplendent in emerald green, her blonde curls arranged in a style that had probably taken her maid 3 hours to achieve. "I'm fine," Lydia said. "You're miserable. You've been standing here for 20 minutes staring at the weather like it personally offended you." "Maybe it did," Charlotte laughed, that bright, careless sound that Lydia both envied and found exhausting. "Come, dance, smile, pretend you're having a wonderful time. That's what the rest of us are doing." "I'd rather not." "Lydia," Charlotte's voice dropped, losing its playful edge. "Your brother is watching, and he doesn't look pleased." Lydia's gaze drifted across the ballroom until she found Edward. Her brother stood near the card room, deep in conversation with Lord Pemberton, but his eyes kept flicking toward her. Even from this distance, she could read the warning in them. Behave yourself. She lifted her chin slightly, a gesture that said she'd heard him and chosen to ignore him. Charlotte sighed. "You're impossible." "I'm honest. There's a difference." "In this world, there isn't." Charlotte squeezed her arm once, then glided back into the crowd, already laughing at something a young viscount was saying. Lydia turned back to the windows. The truth was, she didn't belong here. She never had. These people, with their careful smiles and their carefully curated lives, they exhausted her. The whole game of it. Who was in favor? Who was out? Who had money? Who had lost it? Who was climbing? Who was falling? She'd watched it all her life, and it had taught her one thing. Most people would rather preserve a comfortable lie than face an uncomfortable truth. The ballroom doors opened. It wasn't dramatic. There was no sudden hush, no collective gasp, but something shifted in the air, like the moment before lightning strikes. Lydia felt it before she saw him. She turned. The man in the doorway was tall, dark-haired, dressed in black that made him look like a piece of the storm had followed him inside. His face was all sharp angles, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, eyes that were a pale, startling gray. He looked like he'd been carved from granite and left out in the rain until all the softness had been worn away. He looked dangerous. He looked familiar. And then she realized why. "Is that—" Charlotte had reappeared at her side, breathless. "Lydia, is that him?" "Rowan Blackthorne," Lydia whispered. The name hung in the air between them like a curse. The Duke of Greystone. Or he had been once. Before the scandal, before the trial, before he disappeared into exile with his title stripped and his name dragged through every newspaper in England. That had been 5 years ago. No one had expected him to return. "What's he doing here?" Charlotte's voice was barely audible. "I don't know." But Lydia couldn't look away. Rowan Blackthorne moved through the ballroom like a predator through tall grass. People stepped aside without seeming to realize they were doing it. Conversations faltered, then resumed in lower tones. Women stared. Men watched with the particular wariness of those who recognize a threat but aren't sure what form it will take. He ignored all of them. His gaze swept the room once, methodical, and then he looked directly at her. The impact of it was physical. Lydia felt her breath catch, felt heat climb up her throat despite the coolness of the room. Those gray eyes held hers for 1 second, 2, 3, and in that brief eternity she felt seen in a way she'd never experienced before. Not assessed, not judged, but recognized. Then he looked away, and the spell broke. Lydia. Charlotte grabbed her arm. Come on, we should… No. What? I'm not running. I'm not suggesting we run. I'm suggesting we strategically relocate to the other side of the… Lydia. But Lydia was already moving. She didn't know why. It was reckless, probably stupid, but something in her, that same stubborn streak that had gotten her into trouble her entire life, refused to look away, refused to retreat. She crossed the ballroom floor, aware of eyes following her, aware that she was doing exactly what everyone else was too polite or too frightened to do. She walked straight up to Rowan Blackthorne. Up close, he was even more imposing, tall enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. The black coat fit him perfectly, tailored to shoulders that looked like they'd been built for harder work than lifting champagne flutes. His face was weathered in a way that London society faces never were. There were fine lines at the corners of his eyes, a thin scar along his jaw that disappeared into the collar of his shirt. He looked like he'd spent 5 years in hell and brought some of it back with him. "You're staring," he said. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it much lately, or like he'd spent too long shouting into the wind. "So is everyone else," Lydia replied. "I'm just doing it honestly." Something flickered in those gray eyes. Not quite amusement, but close. Honest. That's a rare quality in a place like this. "So is courage. What are you doing here, Your Grace? I'm not a duke anymore. Haven't been for 5 years. Funny, you carry yourself like one. And you carry yourself like someone who doesn't belong here either." The observation was so accurate it felt like a slap. Lydia felt her cheeks flush. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you're the only person in this room who's looked me in the eye tonight." He studied her face with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. "I know your name is Lydia Everhart. I know your brother is Edward Everhart, Member of Parliament, rising star, friend to the powerful." The way he said friend to the powerful made it sound like an accusation. Lydia's pulse quickened. "How do you…" "And I know," Rowan continued, his voice dropping lower, "that you're either very brave or very foolish to be talking to me. Maybe I'm both. That," he said quietly, "is what I'm afraid of." Before she could ask what he meant, a hand closed on her elbow. "Lydia." Edward's voice was smooth, controlled, but she heard the steel beneath it. "Mother's looking for you." "No, she isn't." "Now, Lydia." She turned to face her brother. Edward Everhart was everything society expected a gentleman to be. Handsome, polished, impeccably dressed, with the kind of easy charm that opened doors and loosened purse strings. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his smile perfectly calibrated. She'd never trusted him. Not completely. Not since she was 10 years old and had watched him lie to their father about who broke the study window, smooth and practiced, while she stood there knowing the truth and wondering when he'd learned to lie so well. "I was having a conversation," she said. "No, you were making a spectacle." Edward's gaze shifted to Rowan, and something hard entered it. "Blackthorne, I'm surprised to see you. Are you? I'd heard you were on the continent. France, wasn't it? Among other places. What brings you back to London?" "Unfinished business." The words hung in the air like a blade. Edward's smile didn't waver, but Lydia saw his jaw tighten. "I see. Well, I hope you enjoy your visit. Come, Lydia." "I can make my own decisions about when to leave a conversation, Edward." "Not tonight, you can't." He pulled her away, gentle but firm, and she was too aware of the people watching to make a scene. As they moved through the crowd, she glanced back once. Rowan Blackthorne was still standing there, watching her with those unsettling gray eyes, and something in his expression made her blood run cold and hot at the same time. Unfinished business. What the hell were you thinking? They were in the study now, away from the guests, the door closed firmly behind them. Edward paced the length of the room like a caged animal, his composure finally cracking. "I was thinking I'd introduce myself to a guest at a party," Lydia said. "Is that a crime now?" "Do you know who that man is? What he did?" "I know what he was accused of doing. There's a difference." Edward stopped pacing and turned to face her. "He embezzled funds from the War Office, sold military secrets,
nearly caused a diplomatic incident with France. He was tried, convicted, and exiled. Those are facts, Lydia, not accusations. He was never convicted. The trial collapsed. Because he fled the country before they could finish. Or because the evidence was fabricated. Edward stared at her. You've been reading those radical newspapers again, haven't you? The ones that claim corruption and conspiracy behind every scandal? I read everything, Edward.
Unlike some people, I don't limit myself to what's comfortable. This isn't about comfort, it's about reality. Rowan Blackthorne is dangerous. He's a criminal, and he ran a hand through his hair, disrupting the careful styling. You just walked up to him in front of half of London society like he was anyone else. Maybe that's because I don't judge people based on gossip. It's not gossip, it's public record. Public records can be wrong. For God's sake, Lydia, Edward's voice dropped, losing its anger and gaining something that sounded almost like pleading. Why do you have to be so stubborn? Why can't you just what? Keep my head down? Smile and nod? Pretend everything's fine when it isn't? Yes, if that's what it takes to protect yourself, then yes. The words came out louder than he'd intended. They both fell silent. Lydia studied her brother's face, saw the tension in it, the fear poorly disguised as anger.
What are you so afraid of, Edward? I'm afraid for you. No. She stepped closer. You're afraid of something. What is it? You're imagining things. Am I? You've been tense for weeks, distracted. You barely eat, you barely sleep. And tonight, when Rowan Blackthorne walked into that ballroom, you looked like you'd seen a ghost. I was surprised, that's all. You were terrified. Lydia, why is he back, Edward? What's the unfinished business he mentioned? Her brother's face closed down, that smooth mask sliding back into place. I have no idea, and neither should you. Stay away from him, Lydia. I mean it. Or what? Or I'll have no choice but to restrict your activities. You're still living under my roof, under my protection. That comes with expectations. Lydia laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Expectations. Is that what we're calling it now? I'm trying to keep you safe. You're trying to keep me controlled. There's a difference. She turned toward the door, but Edward's voice stopped her. He's going to hurt you, Lydia. If you get involved with whatever he's planning, it will end badly. I'm trying to warn you before that happens. She looked back at him. How do you know he's planning something? Because I know men like him. They don't come back unless they want revenge. And what does he have to be vengeful about? Edward's expression was unreadable. Nothing. Everything. Does it matter? Just promise me you'll stay away from him. Lydia studied her brother for a long moment, saw the desperation he was trying to hide, saw the lie underneath it. I promise, she said. It was the first time she'd lied to his face in years. She meant to keep her distance. She really did. For 3 days, she avoided the parts of London where Rowan Blackthorne might appear. She declined invitations to parties, stayed home, read books, and tried not to think about those gray eyes or that rough voice or the way he'd looked at her like he could see straight through to her bones. It didn't work. On the 4th day, she found herself in Hyde Park despite the threatening rain, walking the paths near the Serpentine where the crowds were thinner and she could breathe without someone watching her every move. And of course, he was there. He sat on a bench overlooking the water, dressed in dark clothes that made him blend into the overcast day, his face tilted up toward the sky like he was daring the rain to fall. Lydia stopped. She could turn around, walk away, pretend she hadn't seen him. Instead, she walked over and sat down beside him. Following me? He asked without looking at her. Coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences. Neither do I. That got a small smile from him. It transformed his face, softening the hard edges for just a moment. You didn't listen to your brother. I rarely do. That's either very brave or very stupid. You said that before. It's still true. He finally looked at her, and the intensity of it hit her like a wave. Why are you here, Miss Everhart? I could ask you the same thing. I asked first. Lydia looked out at the water, watching the wind push ripples across its surface. I wanted to know if you were real. That night at the ball felt like a fever dream. This whole situation feels like that, actually. Like I'm watching a play, and any moment someone's going to realize I'm not supposed to be here.
I know that feeling. Do you? I've been living it for 5 years. The rawness in his voice surprised her, made him seem less like the dangerous phantom everyone whispered about, and more like just a man carrying too much weight. What happened? She asked quietly. Really happened, I mean, not the version in the newspapers. You want the truth? I always want the truth. Rowan was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled, but she heard the fury beneath it. 5 years ago, I worked for the War Office. I was responsible for overseeing military contracts, ensuring the suppliers were legitimate, the prices fair. It was boring work mostly, until I started noticing discrepancies. What kind of discrepancies? Payments that didn't match the goods received, suppliers who didn't exist, money disappearing into accounts that led nowhere. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. I started digging, found a network of corruption that went all the way to the top. Generals, politicians, titled men who should have known better. They were stealing from their own country, getting rich while soldiers went without proper equipment. Lydia felt cold. And you tried to expose them. I thought I was doing the right thing, thought the truth mattered. He laughed, a harsh sound. I was naive. What happened? They destroyed me first, planted evidence, forged documents, turned my own investigation against me. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. The newspapers called me a traitor. Society turned its back. My title was stripped, my assets frozen. And the man who orchestrated it all, he stopped abruptly. What? Who was it? Rowan turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her stomach drop. Your brother. The words hit her like a physical blow. For a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The world narrowed to those two words, repeated again and again in her head. Your brother. Your brother. Your brother. No. She stood up abruptly, backing away. That's not... Edward Everhart was the junior minister overseeing my department. He had access to all my reports, all my evidence. And when I got too close to the truth, he made sure I paid for it. You're lying. I wish I was. Edward is... He's not perfect, but he wouldn't... Her voice broke. Why should I believe you? You're the one everyone says is a criminal. Because your instincts told you something was wrong the moment I mentioned unfinished business at that ball. Because you've been watching your brother carefully for weeks, noticing how tense he is, how frightened. Because part of you already knows I'm telling the truth. Lydia wanted to deny it, wanted to call him a liar and walk away and forget this conversation ever happened. But she couldn't, because he was right. She'd felt it. That nagging sense that something was off, that Edward was hiding something. She'd dismissed it, told herself she was being paranoid, but I need proof, she said. If what you're saying is true, I need to see evidence. I don't have any. Not anymore. That's why I'm here, to get it back. Then how do you expect me to believe you? I don't. Rowan stood, moving toward her slowly, like she was a wild thing that might bolt. I expect you to investigate. Look at your brother's records, his correspondence, his finances. Look at who he meets with, what he does when he thinks no one's watching. And when you find something that doesn't add up, because you will, come find me. And if I don't find anything, then I'm wrong, and you can forget we ever had this conversation. Just like that? Just like that? They stood there in the fading light, the wind picking up, the first drops of rain beginning to fall. Lydia searched his face, looking for the lie, the manipulation, the hidden agenda. All she saw was exhaustion and determination in equal measure. Where are you staying? She asked. The Albion Hotel, room 7. That's a terrible part of town. I'm not here to enjoy myself. The rain was falling harder now, cold and insistent. Lydia pulled her cloak tighter. I'm not promising anything. I'm not asking you to. But I'll look. I'll investigate. And if I find that you're lying, if this is some elaborate scheme to hurt my family, then I'll deserve whatever happens to me. Rowan's gray eyes held hers. But I'm not lying, Miss Everhart. And when you discover that, I'll be waiting. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the rain and the gathering darkness. Lydia stood there alone, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath her feet, and nothing would ever be quite steady again. She started that night, Edward kept his private study locked, but Lydia had stolen a copy of the key years ago, back when she'd been curious about his work and too young to know better than to pry. She waited until the house was asleep, until the servants had retired and Edward had gone to his club for the evening. Then she slipped into his study like a thief in her own home. The room smelled of leather and tobacco, masculine and familiar. She'd spent countless afternoons here as a child, reading while Edward worked, comfortable in the silence. Now it felt foreign, dangerous. She started with the desk drawers, found the expected things: correspondence, bills, invitations, a half-empty bottle of whiskey hidden behind the ledgers. She almost laughed at that. Even perfect Edward had his small rebellions. The ledgers themselves seemed normal at first glance. Income and expenses, all carefully recorded. Edward was meticulous about his accounts. Too meticulous, maybe. She paged through them slowly, running her finger down the columns of numbers, looking for what? She didn't even know. Then she saw it. A payment. £3,000 paid to a company called Meridian Holdings, listed under consulting services. It wouldn't have caught her attention except for the date, 2 weeks before Rowan Blackthorn's trial had collapsed. Lydia's heart began to pound. She kept reading, found another payment. £5,000, same company, dated a month earlier. And another. Tens of thousands of pounds, paid out over the course of 3 months, all to this Meridian Holdings that she'd never heard Edward mention. She searched the rest of the study, looking for any reference to the company. Found nothing. Not a single letter, not a contract, not even a business card. It could be legitimate. There could be a perfectly reasonable explanation. But her hands were shaking as she closed the ledgers and returned them to their exact position. She searched for another hour, careful to disturb nothing, leave no trace of her presence. Found nothing else unusual, nothing damning, just those payments, just that name. Meridian Holdings. She was about to leave when she heard voices in the hallway. Lydia froze. "Don't care what it takes. Make it happen." Edward's voice, low and urgent. "It's not that simple. He's asking questions, making inquiries, then stop him." A pause. "Permanently, if necessary." Lydia's blood turned to ice. "Are you certain? That's a dangerous path." "More dangerous than letting him dig up the past? More dangerous than letting him ruin everything we've built?" "Who exactly are we talking about?" "Blackthorn." "Who else?" Lydia's hands flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. "I thought he'd learned his lesson," the other voice said. She recognized it now, Lord Pemberton, Edward's frequent companion. "I thought exile would be enough." Clearly it wasn't. He's been back in London less than a week and he's already causing problems. Making inquiries at the War Office, talking to old colleagues. It's only a matter of time before he pieces something together. "What do you want me to do?" "Watch him. Have your people follow him. And if he gets too close to anything that might expose us..." Edward's voice dropped so low Lydia could barely hear it. "Do what needs to be done." Footsteps, moving away. Lydia waited until the house was silent again, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Then she slipped out of the study, up the stairs, into her own room. She locked the door, sat on her bed, stared at the wall. Do what needs to be done. Edward had essentially just ordered Rowan Blackthorn's death. Her brother. The man who'd taught her to ride a horse, who'd brought her books when she was sick, who'd stood at their father's funeral with his arm around her shoulders. That Edward had just calmly discussed murdering someone. Lydia couldn't breathe. The walls felt too close, the air too thick. Everything she'd thought she knew was crumbling, reshaping itself into something dark and twisted and wrong. She had to warn Rowan. She had to get out of this house. She had to... The door rattled. "Lydia?" Edward's voice. "Are you awake?" She didn't answer, didn't move. "Lydia, I know you're in there. We need to talk." Still, she said nothing. "Very well." His footsteps retreated, then, "I know you were in my study tonight. I know what you saw. And I need you to understand everything I've done I did to protect this family. To protect you. Don't throw that away by trusting the wrong person." Silence. "Good night, Lydia. I hope you make the right choice." She sat there in the darkness long after his footsteps faded, her mind racing, her heart broken. and knew with absolute certainty that there was no right choice anymore. There was only what she could live with and what she couldn't. The Albion Hotel was exactly as run down as its location suggested. Peeling paint, broken shutters, the smell of mildew and cheap gin hanging in the air. Lydia kept her hood up, her head down, and prayed no one recognized her. Room 7 was on the second floor, at the end of a dimly lit hallway that creaked with every step. She knocked. The door opened immediately, like he'd been waiting for her. Rowan Blackthorne looked different in this setting, less imposing, more real. His shirt was half unbuttoned, his hair disheveled. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "You came," he said. "I need to tell you something." He stepped aside, letting her in. The room was small, spare, a bed, a chair, a table covered in papers and maps. The window looked out onto an alley where rats fought over scraps. "Charming," Lydia said. "It serves its purpose." Rowan closed the door, but left it unlocked. She noticed that, appreciated it. "What did you find?" "Payments. Large ones made by my brother to a company called Meridian Holdings right around the time of your trial. And tonight," her voice caught. "Tonight I heard him talking to Lord Pemberton. He knows you're asking questions. He's having you followed. And he said what? That if you get too close to exposing them, they'll do what needs to be done." His exact words. Rowan's expression didn't change, but something hardened in his eyes. "So, it's come to that. You don't seem surprised." "I'm not. Men like your brother don't survive by playing fair. They survive by being willing to do things others won't." "He's going to kill you." The words came out strangled. "My brother is going to have you murdered, and I—" She couldn't finish. Rowan moved closer, his presence steadying. "Lydia, look at me." She did, saw concern in those gray eyes, along with something else. Respect, maybe. Recognition of what it had cost her to come here. "I'm not an easy man to kill," he said quietly. "I've survived 5 years in places that make London look like a drawing room. I'll survive this too. But what I need from you is information, evidence, your brother's records, his correspondence, anything that ties him to Meridian Holdings or the corruption at the War Office. Can you get that for me?" Lydia's mind was racing. "I can try. But if Edward suspects I'm helping you, then we'll be careful. We'll meet in secret, pass information through intermediaries. No one needs to know you're involved." "And what happens when you have your evidence? What are you going to do with it?" "Destroy the men who destroyed me, starting with your brother." The word should have made her flinch, should have made her turn around and run back to her safe, comfortable lie of a life. Instead, she felt something settle in her chest, something like purpose. "All right," she said, "I'll help you, but on one condition." "What's that?" "We do this the right way. We gather evidence, we build a case that can't be dismissed or covered up. And when the truth comes out, it's done publicly, legitimately. I won't be part of some revenge plot that makes you as bad as them." Rowan studied her face. "You still believe in justice, in the system." "I believe in truth, and I believe that truth, properly presented, is more powerful than any lie." "You're naive. Maybe. But that's my condition. Take it or leave it." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, slowly, he nodded. "All right. We do it your way. But Lydia—" He caught her hand, and the contact sent electricity up her arm. "This path you're choosing, it's dangerous. Your brother won't forgive you for this. Society won't forgive you. You'll lose everything." "I know." "And you're willing to pay that price?" She thought about Edward's cold voice discussing murder, thought about Rowan sitting alone in this terrible room, fighting for justice that no one believed he deserved, thought about all the comfortable lies she'd been living with her entire life. "Yes," she said. "I am." Rowan's hand tightened on hers. "Then we start tomorrow. There's a place outside the city, an old hunting lodge that belonged to my family. No one uses it anymore. We can meet there, plan our next moves without being seen." "How do I find it?" "Take the road north out of London. About 10 miles out, there's a fork. Take the left path into the woods. The lodge is half a mile in. You'll know it when you see it. And if I'm followed, then don't come. Turn back and I'll find another way to contact you." Lydia nodded, released his hand, though part of her wanted to hold on.
I should go before someone realizes I'm gone. Be careful. You too. She made it to the door before his voice stopped her. Lydia. She turned. Thank you. The words were rough, unpracticed, like he'd forgotten how to accept help from anyone. For believing me.
For choosing to look at the evidence instead of just accepting what you were told. That's rarer than you think. Maybe, she said softly. Or maybe people just need someone to believe in them before they're willing to be brave. She slipped out into the night, leaving him standing in that shabby room with something that might have been hope flickering in his gray eyes. The storm was coming. She could feel it building, could see the dark clouds gathering on the horizon of her life. But for the first time in years, Lydia felt like she was finally on the right side of something, even if it cost her everything. The hunting lodge materialized from the mist like something out of a ghost story. Stone walls covered in ivy, windows dark as dead eyes, the roof sagging in places where time and weather had done their work. Lydia dismounted from the horse she'd borrowed from the stable, telling the groom she needed a morning ride to clear her head. Not entirely a lie. The woods pressed in close, thick with undergrowth and the smell of rotting leaves. Birds called overhead, their voices harsh and unfamiliar. This wasn't the manicured London she knew, with its clean streets and gaslights. This was something older, wilder, more honest. She tied the horse to a post that looked half-rotten and approached the door. It opened before she could knock. Rowan stood there in shirt sleeves, his hair still damp like he'd dunked his head in cold water. Behind him, she could see he'd been busy. The main room was cleaner than it had any right to be, a fire crackling in the hearth, papers spread across a makeshift table constructed from old crates. "You found it," he said. "Your directions were good. Anyone follow you?" "I don't think so. I took the long way, doubled back twice." She stepped inside, grateful for the warmth. "How long have you been here?" "Since dawn. Couldn't sleep." He gestured to the papers. "I've been mapping out what we know, what we need to find." Lydia moved closer, studying his work. He'd drawn connections between names, dates, amounts. Edward's name appeared frequently, linked to others she recognized: Lord Pemberton, Sir Richard Ashford, General Morrison. The web of corruption spread wider than she'd imagined. "This is everyone involved?" she asked. "Everyone I could confirm. There are probably more." Rowan pointed to Meridian Holdings, circled in red at the center. "This is the key. The company doesn't exist, at least not officially. No registration, no business address, no officers listed. It's a shell, a way to move money without leaving tracks. But the money went somewhere." Exactly. If we can trace where those payments ended up, we can prove the whole scheme." Lydia pulled the papers she'd stolen from her cloak. "I copied what I could from Edward's ledgers. Every payment to Meridian, along with the dates and amounts. And I found something else." She unfolded a letter, her hands unsteady. "This was in his private correspondence. It's from Lord Pemberton, dated 3 months before your trial." Rowan took it, his eyes scanning the words. His jaw tightened. "The Blackthorn matter must be handled decisively. We cannot afford loose ends." He looked up at her. "This is it. This is proof they planned it." "It's not enough," Lydia said. "It's suggestive, but it doesn't prove anything concrete. A good lawyer would tear it apart, say they were discussing legitimate business, that you're twisting the meaning. Then what do we need? Bank records, the actual money trail showing where those payments went, and testimony from someone inside the scheme willing to turn." Rowan laughed, harsh and bitter. "You think any of these men will turn on each other? They're bound by shared guilt. They all go down together, or not at all. Then we find evidence they can't deny. We build a case so airtight that even the best lawyers can't dismiss it." She met his eyes. "You said you worked at the War Office. You must have kept copies of your original investigation, the evidence you found before they destroyed you." "I did. But it's gone. They seized everything when they arrested me." "Everything?" He hesitated. "There might be one thing. Before the trial collapsed, I gave a set of documents to someone I trusted, a clerk at the War Office named Thomas Brennan. Told him to hide them, keep them safe, but that was 5 years ago. I have no idea if he still has them, or if he's even still alive." "Then we find him." "Lydia,
If these men killed to protect their secret once, they'll do it again. If we start asking questions about Thomas Brennan, then we're careful. We're smart. She moved closer, her voice urgent. Rowan, we can't give up before we've even started, not when we're this close. He studied her face, something unreadable in his expression. Why are you doing this? Really? You could walk away right now, go back to your comfortable life, pretend none of this ever happened. Could I? Lydia's voice was sharper than she intended. Could I really go back to sitting in drawing rooms, making polite conversation, knowing what my brother did? Knowing he's planning to kill you? That's not a life, that's cowardice. Most people choose cowardice over risk. Then I'm not most people. The silence stretched between them, charged with something neither wanted to name. Finally, Rowan nodded. All right, we find Brennan, but we do it carefully. No direct approach, no obvious questions. We watch, we listen, we wait for the right moment. Agreed. They spent the next hour planning, their heads bent over maps and documents, voices low and urgent. Lydia found herself acutely aware of how close they were standing, how their hands occasionally brushed when reaching for the same paper, how his voice dropped even lower when he was thinking hard. She pushed the thoughts away. This wasn't the time. There might never be a time. I should get back, she said finally, noticing the angle of light through the grimy windows. Before someone notices I'm gone. When can you come again? 2 days. I'll tell Edward I'm visiting Charlotte. She'll cover for me. Will she? Charlotte doesn't ask questions she doesn't want answers to. That makes her either very wise or very cowardly. I haven't decided which. Rowan walked her to the door. Outside, the mist had thickened, turning the world gray and indistinct. Lydia? He caught her arm gently. Be careful. Your brother knows something's wrong. He's watching you. I know. If he confronts you directly, I'll lie. I've gotten good at it lately. She meant it as a joke, but it came out sad instead. Rowan's grip tightened slightly. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. Sorry I'm making you choose between your family and the truth. You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose this. She met his eyes. And I'd choose it again. Before she could second-guess herself, she pulled away and mounted her horse, rode back through the woods without looking back, even though she felt his gaze on her the entire way. Edward was waiting when she returned. He sat in the morning room, a cup of tea cooling on the table beside him, his posture deceptively relaxed. But Lydia saw the tension in his shoulders, the careful blankness of his expression. Good ride? He asked. Yes, thank you. Where did you go? Just the usual paths, around the park, through Kensington. Funny, I sent a groom to find you there. He said you never appeared. Lydia's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. I changed my route. The park was too crowded. I see. Edward set down his teacup with precise care. Lydia, we need to have an honest conversation, and I need you to tell me the truth. About what? About what you're doing, who you're meeting, why you've suddenly become so interested in my private affairs. I don't know what you mean. Don't. The word came out sharp. Don't lie to me. I've known you your entire life. I can tell when you're hiding something. Maybe you don't know me as well as you think. Edward stood, moving toward her with that predatory grace he could summon when necessary. I found your lamp in my study, still warm, left on the wrong shelf. You were there. You went through my papers. There was no point denying it. Yes. Why? Because someone told me things about you, things that didn't make sense, and I wanted to see if they were true. Someone. His voice went cold. You mean Blackthorn? I mean someone who asked questions I couldn't ignore. And what did you find in my study? What great conspiracy did you uncover? Lydia lifted her chin. Payments to a company that doesn't exist. Correspondence discussing how to handle Rowan Blackthorn. Proof that you're not the man you pretend to be. Edward's face went very still. For a moment she thought he might hit her, saw his hand twitch, saw rage flicker in his eyes before he got it under control. You have no idea what you're talking about, he said quietly. No idea what was at stake, what I was trying to protect. Protect? You destroyed an innocent man. Innocent? Edward laughed, a broken sound.
Is that what he told you? That he's some noble victim, wrongly accused? He's lying to you, Lydia, using you to get to me. Then explain the payments. Explain Meridian Holdings. I can't. You mean you won't? I mean I can't. He ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time he looked his age, looked tired and frightened and human. There are things you don't understand. Forces at work bigger than you or me or Blackthorn. If I try to explain, if I give you details, it will only put you in more danger. I'm already in danger. You made sure of that when you decided to have Rowan killed. Edward flinched. You heard that. Every word. That conversation. It wasn't what you think. I was trying to scare Pemberton, make him back off. I would never actually... He stopped, seeing the disbelief on her face. Fine. Don't believe me. But know this. If you continue down this path, if you keep helping Blackthorn, you will destroy yourself. Society will turn on you. Every door will close. You'll have nothing. At least I'll have the truth. The truth? Edward's voice rose. The truth is a luxury, Lydia. The truth is what people with power can afford to ignore. In the real world, survival matters more than virtue. Not to me. They stood facing each other, the space between them vast despite the small room. Lydia saw her brother clearly for the first time in years, saw the fear and the guilt and the desperate need to justify what he'd done, saw that whatever had started as pragmatism had long since become something darker. I'm your brother, Edward said finally, his voice breaking. Doesn't that count for anything? It counts for everything. That's why this hurts so much. She turned to leave. If you walk out that door, Edward said, if you choose him over me, I won't be able to protect you anymore. Not from Pemberton, not from the others. They'll come after you, Lydia, and I won't be able to stop them. She looked back at him. Then I guess I'll have to protect myself. Charlotte's townhouse was smaller than the Everhart estate, but infinitely more comfortable. Warm colors, overstuffed furniture, books scattered everywhere in cheerful disorder. It was the one place in London where Lydia felt like she could breathe. You look terrible, Charlotte said, pouring tea. What's happened? Edward knows. Knows what? That I've been investigating him, that I'm helping Rowan, everything. Charlotte set down the teapot with a clatter. Oh, Lydia, what did he say? That I'm destroying myself, that I should stop before it's too late. Lydia accepted the tea but didn't drink it. He's not wrong, but I can't stop, not now. Can't or won't. Does it matter? Charlotte studied her with those sharp blue eyes that saw too much. You're falling for him, the Duke. Don't be ridiculous. I saw how you looked at him at the ball, and I see how you look now, like someone who's found something worth fighting for. That's either love or madness, and with you, it could be both. Lydia felt heat climb her cheeks. This isn't about feelings. It's about justice. It's always about justice with you, but justice doesn't keep you warm at night, Lydia. It doesn't hold your hand when you're frightened, and it won't catch you when you fall. Then I'll fall alone. You don't have to. Charlotte leaned forward. Come away with me. Right now, today. We'll go to Paris or Rome or anywhere that isn't here. Start fresh. Leave all this mess behind. For a moment, Lydia was tempted. Could see it so clearly. The two of them in some sunlit foreign city, free from expectations and scandal and the weight of truth. It would be so easy. I can't, she said. Because of him. Because of me. Because I need to know I'm the kind of person who doesn't run when things get hard, even if it costs me everything. Charlotte sighed. You're infuriating. I know. And stubborn. That too. And you're absolutely certain about this? About throwing away your entire life for a man you barely know, and a truth that no one wants to hear? Lydia thought about Rowan standing in that shabby hotel room, exhausted and alone. Thought about Edward's cold voice discussing murder. Thought about all the comfortable lies she'd lived with her entire life. Yes, she said, I'm certain. Charlotte was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood, walked to her desk, and pulled out a small notebook. Then you'll need this. What is it? Information. Gossip, mostly. The kind of things women hear at tea parties and dismiss as idle chatter.
But I've been paying attention over the years. Names, connections, scandals that got covered up. It's all here. Lydia took the notebook, stunned. Charlotte, don't thank me yet. Half of it's probably useless. But if you're really doing this, if you're really going to take on Edward and his friends, you'll need every advantage you can get. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Besides, someone should hold these men accountable. Might as well be you. I thought you didn't care about justice. I don't. But I care about you. Charlotte squeezed her hand. So try not to get yourself killed, all right? I'd hate to have to find a new best friend.
Finding Thomas Brennan proved harder than expected. The War Office had no record of him in current employment. The address Rowan remembered led to a boarding house where the landlady claimed no one by that name had ever lived. It was like the man had vanished into smoke. They got to him, Rowan said. They were back at the hunting lodge, surrounded by increasingly desperate notes and dead-end leads. They either paid him off or scared him off. Or worse. We can't think like that. Not yet. Lydia studied Charlotte's notebook for the dozenth time, looking for any connection she'd missed. There has to be something. Someone who knows where he went. After 5 years, people forget. People move on. Not everyone. She tapped a name in the notebook. Sarah Brennan, Thomas's sister. Charlotte mentions her here, says she married a shopkeeper in Whitechapel 3 years ago. If Thomas is alive, she'd know where to find him. Rowan looked skeptical. And if she's been warned to keep quiet, then we convince her otherwise. How? By telling her the truth. By making her understand what's at stake. You really believe people will choose truth over safety? I have to. Otherwise, what are we even doing? The question hung in the air between them. Outside, rain had started again, drumming on the roof with increasing urgency. Whitechapel's dangerous, Rowan said finally, especially for someone like you. If we're going there, we go prepared. Prepared how? He opened a trunk in the corner, pulled out a small pistol. Can you shoot? Lydia stared at the weapon. I don't. Then you learn. Now. They spent the next hour in the woods behind the lodge, Rowan teaching her the basics. How to load, how to aim, how to squeeze the trigger instead of pulling. The gun kicked harder than she expected, the noise shockingly loud even in the open air. Her first 3 shots went wide. The 4th barely nicked the tree he'd marked as a target. Terrible, Rowan said. I've had exactly 1 lesson. If someone's trying to kill you, they won't care about your learning curve. But his voice was gentler than his words. Try again. Focus on your breathing. The shot comes between heartbeats. She tried again. This time the bullet hit closer to center. Better. Still terrible. Terrible but improving. That's all anyone can ask. They stood there in the rain, both soaked through, her hands aching from the recoil. Lydia lowered the gun, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, how his hand had moved to steady her wrist, how his breath was warm against her temple. Rowan, don't. His voice was rough. Whatever you're about to say, don't. Why not? Because I'm not a good man, Lydia. I'm angry and vengeful and selfish. I pulled you into this knowing it would hurt you, knowing it might destroy you, because I wanted justice more than I cared about the cost to anyone else. You should hate me for that. But I don't. Then you're a fool. Maybe. But I'm a fool who sees you clearly. She turned to face him fully. You're not what Edward said you are. You're not what anyone says. You're just a man trying to survive in a world that already decided you're guilty. And I understand that. Better than you know. Something cracked in Rowan's expression. The careful control he maintained slipped, just for a moment, and she saw the raw need underneath, not for revenge, not for vindication, but for someone to see him as human, as worthy of defending. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle or practiced, it was desperate and rough, tasting of rain and gunpowder and 5 years of loneliness. Lydia froze for 1 heartbeat, 2, then kissed him back with equal ferocity, her hands fisting in his wet shirt, pulling him closer, even though they were already pressed together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rowan's eyes were wide with something like panic. I shouldn't have... That was... Stop talking, Lydia said, and kissed him again. This time it was slower, deeper. His hands came up to cradle her face like she was something precious and breakable. She made a small sound in her throat, and he pulled back, resting his forehead against hers. "This complicates everything," he said. "I know. If people find out, let them." "Lydia, you don't understand what you're saying. If society thinks you're involved with me, you'll be ruined. Completely, irreparably ruined." "I'm already ruined. I just haven't made it official yet." He laughed, brief and startled. "You're insane." "Probably, but at least I'm honest about it." They stood there in the rain for another moment, neither wanting to move, both knowing they had to. Finally, Rowan stepped back, putting careful distance between them. "Whitechapel," he said. "Tomorrow. We find Sarah Brennan and pray she knows something useful. And if she doesn't, then we improvise." Lydia smiled despite everything. "You really know how to show a girl a good time." "I never promised you a good time, just an honest one." "I'll take it. What? Whitechapel in the failing light looked like something from a nightmare. Narrow streets choked with refuse, buildings leaning against each other like drunks, the smell of poverty and desperation so thick you could taste it. Lydia kept her cloak pulled tight, the small pistol heavy in her pocket, and tried not to think about how far she'd come from the drawing rooms of Mayfair. Rowan moved through the streets with easy confidence, clearly familiar with places like this. She followed close, watching how he navigated the crowds, how his eyes constantly scanned for threats. "You've been here before," she said. "I've been everywhere before. Exile teaches you to survive in uncomfortable places." "Is that where you went? After the trial?" "Everywhere and nowhere. Paris for a while, then Rome, Prague, Constantinople, anywhere they wouldn't ask too many questions about a disgraced English duke." "That sounds lonely." "It was." He glanced at her. "But it taught me who I really was. When you strip away the title, the money, the respectability, what's left? I spent 5 years finding out. And what did you find? That I'm harder to kill than anyone expected, including me." They found the shop tucked between a pub and a pawnbroker. "Brennan and Sons," the sign proclaimed, though the paint was fading. Through the grimy window, Lydia could see shelves stocked with household goods, a woman behind the counter helping a customer. "That's her," Rowan said quietly. "Sarah Brennan? Or Sarah Wilson now, I suppose." "How can you tell?" "She has Thomas's eyes and his nose." They waited until the customer left, then entered. The bell above the door jangled, cheerful and out of place. Sarah looked up from her ledger. She was maybe 30, plain-faced, with dark hair pulled back severely and hands that showed years of hard work. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw them, or more precisely, when she saw Rowan. "We're closed," she said. "We need to talk to you about your brother," Lydia said. "I don't have a brother." "Thomas Brennan. He worked at the War Office 5 years ago. He disappeared right after Rowan Blackthorn's trial." Sarah's face went pale. "Get out. Please, we just need to know if he's safe, if he's—" "I said get out." Her voice rose, edged with panic. "I don't know anything about any of that. Now leave before I call the constable." "We're not here to cause trouble," Rowan said, stepping forward. "I'm not the man they said I was. Your brother knew that. He tried to help me, and I think it put him in danger. I just need to know he's all right." Sarah stared at him, her breath coming fast. Then abruptly, she moved to the door, flipped the sign to closed, and drew the shade. "Upstairs," she said. "Quickly, before anyone sees you." They followed her through a back door, up a narrow staircase to the living quarters above the shop. The room was small but clean, modestly furnished. Sarah gestured for them to sit, then stood by the window, peering through the curtains like she expected an army to appear. "They told me you were dead," she said without turning around. "Thomas?" "They came 2 days after the trial collapsed, said there'd been an accident at the docks, that his body had been found in the Thames. But they wouldn't let me see him, wouldn't let me bury him properly, just gave me some money and told me to keep quiet if I knew what was good for me." Lydia's stomach turned. "But you don't believe them." "I don't know what to believe." Sarah finally turned to face them, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Thomas was careful. He didn't take risks, but the night before he supposedly died, he came here. Said he had something important to give me, something I needed to hide.
He was terrified. What did he give you? Rowan's voice was tight with barely controlled emotion. Sarah hesitated, then moved to a trunk in the corner.
From beneath a false bottom, she pulled out a leather portfolio. He said if anything happened to him, I should destroy these. Burn them and forget they existed. She held the portfolio against her chest. But I couldn't. It felt like destroying the only proof he'd ever existed. Rowan stood slowly. May I see it? Sarah looked between them, this disgraced duke and the well-dressed woman who'd followed him into Whitechapel. Lydia could see her weighing trust against fear, hope against bitter experience. Will it help? Sarah asked. Will it prove Thomas was trying to do the right thing? Yes, Lydia said. It will prove he was a hero. That decided it. Sarah handed over the portfolio. Rowan opened it with shaking hands. Inside were dozens of documents, contracts, correspondence, bank statements, all meticulously organized and annotated in a careful clerk's hand. Lydia moved closer, reading over his shoulder, and felt her pulse quicken. It was all here. Every payment, every false contract, every piece of the corruption Rowan had tried to expose. Thomas Brennan had compiled a complete record of the scheme, including bank records showing exactly where the money from Meridian Holdings had gone. This is it, Rowan said, his voice barely above a whisper. This is everything we need. Then why did Thomas have to die for it? Sarah's voice broke. Why couldn't he just give it to the authorities? Let them handle it. Because the authorities were part of the corruption, Lydia said gently. The people who should have protected him were the same ones committing the crimes. He had no one to turn to. Sarah wiped her eyes roughly. Will you get them? The men who did this? Yes, Rowan said. I swear to you, we'll make sure they face justice. Your brother's death won't be meaningless. It already is. Sarah's voice was flat. Justice won't bring him back. It won't give me my brother back. It won't change anything except maybe you'll sleep better at night. The words hit like a slap. Lydia saw Rowan flinch, saw the guilt settle across his features like a shroud. You're right, he said quietly. Nothing I do will fix what was taken from you, but I can make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. That's all I have left to offer. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, once, sharp. Then do it. Make them pay. For Thomas. For all of us they've used and discarded. They left as the last light bled from the sky, the portfolio heavy under Rowan's arm, both of them silent with the weight of what they'd learned. Lydia kept seeing Sarah's face, the bitter acceptance in her eyes. This was what truth cost. Not some abstract price, but real people, real grief. They were 2 streets away when Lydia heard the footsteps behind them. Rowan, I know, keep walking, don't run. But the footsteps were getting closer, multiplying. 3 men, 4, emerging from doorways and alleys with the coordinated precision of a planned attack. Well, well, the voice came from the largest of them, a scarred brute who looked like he ate nails for breakfast. The Duke of Greystone, Lord Pemberton said you might be sniffing around here. Rowan's hand went to his coat, but the men were faster. Steel glinted in the dim light, knives, clubs, weapons meant for close, brutal work. Give us the papers, Scarface said, and maybe we let you walk away. Not a chance. Your funeral. He lunged. What happened next was chaos. Rowan met the first attacker head-on, driving his fist into the man's throat with brutal efficiency. The portfolio dropped, and Lydia grabbed it, backing away as the other men closed in. One of them, younger, faster, came at her with a knife raised. She fumbled for the pistol in her pocket, got it out, aimed like Rowan had taught her. The shot was deafening in the narrow street. The young man dropped, clutching his shoulder, his scream piercing the night. Lydia stood there frozen, the gun smoking in her hand, unable to process that she'd actually shot someone. Lydia, move! Rowan's shout broke through her paralysis. She ran, clutching the portfolio, her legs moving on instinct while her mind screamed at what she'd just done. Behind her, sounds of fighting, flesh on flesh, grunts of pain, the clatter of weapons on cobblestones. She made it to the end of the street before hands grabbed her from behind, yanking her into an alley. The portfolio flew from her grasp, landing in a puddle of filth. Stupid girl, her attacker hissed, his breath hot and foul against her ear. Should have stayed in your fancy house where you belong.
Lydia drove her elbow back as hard as she could, felt it connect with something soft. The grip loosened slightly, enough for her to twist, to grab for the gun still clutched in her other hand. A gunshot, but not from her weapon. The man holding her jerked, his eyes going wide with shock. He stumbled backward, hit the alley wall, slid down, leaving a red streak. Rowan stood at the alley entrance, his own pistol raised, his face hard as granite. "Don't touch her!" The other attackers scattered like rats, dragging their wounded with them, leaving only corpses and blood behind. Lydia stood there, shaking, unable to tear her eyes from the dead man at her feet. She'd never seen death before. Not like this. Not violent and sudden and irreversible. "Hey! Look at me." Rowan's hands were on her shoulders, turning her away from the body. "Look at me, Lydia. You're all right. You're safe." "I shot someone." "You defended yourself. That's different." "Is it?" She looked up at him, saw her own horror reflected in his gray eyes. "We just killed people. We're murderers now." "No, we're survivors. There's a difference." But his voice was hollow, unconvincing. They both knew they'd crossed a line tonight that couldn't be uncrossed. Rowan retrieved the portfolio from the puddle, checked that the documents were still intact. "We need to go, now, before someone calls the constable or more of Pemberton's men show up." They ran through Whitechapel's labyrinth streets until their lungs burned and their legs shook. Finally, in a different district entirely, they stopped in the shadow of a church, both doubled over and gasping. "What now?" Lydia asked when she could breathe again. "Now we use this." Rowan held up the portfolio. "We take it to someone who can't be bought or intimidated. Someone with enough power to force the truth into the light." "Who?" "The Prime Minister himself, tomorrow, before Edward and his friends realize we have this evidence." "Rowan, we can't just walk into Parliament." "We can. We will." His eyes burned with something fierce and desperate. "This is it, Lydia. This is our one shot. If we hesitate, if we wait even a day, they'll find a way to stop us. We have to move now, while we still have the advantage of surprise." She looked at the blood on her dress, thought about the man she'd shot, about Sarah Brennan's bitter face, about all the lies and deaths that had led them to this moment. "All right," she said. "Tomorrow. We end this." They made it back to the hunting lodge near midnight, both exhausted and blood-stained, the portfolio clutched between them like the world's most dangerous treasure. Inside, Rowan lit a fire while Lydia tried to stop shaking. "Drink this." He pressed a flask of whiskey into her hands. She drank, coughed, drank again. The alcohol burned down her throat, warming her from the inside. "I keep seeing his face," she said. "The man I shot. He looked so young." "He was trying to kill you." "I know, but that doesn't make it better." Rowan sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "The first time I killed someone, I was 23. A duel. It was legal then, sort of. The other man insulted my family's honor, and I was too proud and too stupid to walk away. I shot him through the heart. He died instantly." His voice was distant, remembering. "I thought I'd feel triumphant, vindicated. Instead, I just felt sick. Kept thinking about his mother, his siblings, all the people who'd miss him. Kept wondering if honor was worth a life." "What conclusion did you reach?" "That most things people kill over aren't worth it, but some things are. The truth, justice, the people you love." He looked at her. "You." Lydia turned to face him fully, saw the weight he carried, the guilt and rage and desperate hope all tangled together. Saw a man who'd been broken and rebuilt himself into something harder, sharper, but still fundamentally human. She kissed him, not with the desperate passion of before, but with something gentler, more deliberate, a choice made with full knowledge of the cost. When they parted, Rowan's eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. "After tomorrow," he said, "after we've given the Prime Minister this evidence and the truth comes out, what happens to us?" "I don't know." "You'll be ruined. Completely. Every door will close. Then we'll find new doors." "Lydia?" "Stop." She pressed her fingers to his lips. "Stop trying to protect me from the consequences of my own choices. I know what I'm risking. I know what I'll lose. And I'm choosing this anyway. I'm choosing you." Something in Rowan's expression cracked open. He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair, and held on like she was the only solid thing in a world gone liquid. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway." They sat there by the dying fire, neither speaking, both knowing that tomorrow would change everything.
The portfolio lay on the table beside them, full of secrets that would destroy powerful men and upend the careful order of London society. And in the morning, they would walk into the heart of that power and demand justice. Whether they survived it was another question entirely. The morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. Lydia woke stiff from sleeping in a chair, her neck aching, the fire reduced to cold ash. Across the room, Rowan stood by the window watching the dawn break over the trees, the portfolio already tucked under his arm, like it was part of him now. "You didn't sleep," she said. "Couldn't. Kept thinking about all the ways this could go wrong." Optimistic. Realistic. He turned to face her, and in the gray light he looked older, worn down by 5 years of exile and anger. "Once we walk into Parliament with this evidence, there's no going back. Edward will know it was you. Pemberton, Morrison, all of them. They'll know you betrayed them." "Good. Let them know." "Lydia, we've already had this conversation, multiple times. The answer doesn't change." She stood, brushing wrinkles from her ruined dress. "When do we leave?" "Within the hour. Parliament convenes at 10. We need to be there early, before they have time to organize a defense." They rode back to London in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. The city looked different now. No longer the glittering center of civilization, but something more sinister, full of shadows and secrets. Every face in the street could be an enemy. Every window could hide someone watching. By the time they reached Westminster, Lydia's nerves were stretched thin as wire. The building loomed before them, all Gothic spires and self-important stone, the seat of British power looking exactly like what it was. Immovable, eternal, utterly convinced of its own righteousness. "You're sure about this?" Rowan asked one last time. "Stop asking me that." They climbed the steps together. At the entrance, a clerk in a wig that had gone out of fashion 50 years ago looked them up and down with barely disguised contempt. "Can I help you?" "We need to see the Prime Minister," Rowan said. "It's urgent." "I'm sure it is. Everyone who comes here thinks their business is urgent." The clerk sniffed. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but then I'm afraid the Prime Minister is unavailable. Perhaps you could submit a written request and someone will review it in 6 to 8 weeks. Lydia stepped forward. "We have evidence of corruption within the War Office, evidence of embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy at the highest levels. If the Prime Minister doesn't see us immediately, we'll take this information to the Times and let them publish it for everyone to read." The clerk's expression shifted from contempt to alarm. You can't just threaten." "We're not threatening. We're offering a courtesy. The Prime Minister can control how this story breaks, or he can read about it in the morning papers like everyone else. His choice." The clerk's mouth worked soundlessly. Finally, he gestured to a young page. "Fetch Mr. Hartwick. Tell him it's urgent." They waited in a small antechamber, standing because sitting felt like admitting weakness. Lydia could feel her heart hammering against her ribs. This was it. The moment everything either came together or fell catastrophically apart. Footsteps in the hall. The door opened. But it wasn't some parliamentary secretary or junior minister who entered. It was Edward. Lydia felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. Her brother stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed as always, his face a careful mask of civility. Behind him, she could see Lord Pemberton and 2 other men she didn't recognize. "Hello, Lydia," Edward said quietly. "I was hoping you'd come to your senses. But I see you've made your choice." "How did you—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "How did I know you'd come here? Please. Where else would you go? You've always been predictable when you think you're being righteous." He looked at Rowan with something that might have been pity. "And you? I actually respected your persistence. 5 years in exile and you still came back for revenge. That takes dedication." "This isn't revenge," Rowan said. "It's justice." "There's no difference. Not really." Edward stepped into the room, and Lydia noticed the other men positioning themselves by the door, blocking the exit. "But I'm willing to be reasonable. Give me the portfolio, go back to whatever hole you crawled out of, and I'll make sure Lydia isn't destroyed by association. She can claim you deceived her, used her, Society loves a victimized woman. No, Lydia said. I wasn't asking you. Edward's eyes stayed on Rowan. This is between men. You've made your point. You've scared us, cost us sleep, made us scramble. Congratulations. Now be smart and walk away while you still can. Rowan's hand tightened on the portfolio. The evidence is already copied, multiple copies held by multiple people. If anything happens to us, it goes public immediately. He was lying. Lydia knew it, could hear it in the slight strain in his voice. They'd been too rushed, too desperate. There were no copies. Edward knew it too. His smile was cold. No, you don't. You came straight here from Whitechapel. Yes, I know about last night. I know about the dead men in the alley. I know everything. You haven't had time to make copies. You barely had time to clean the blood off. He held out his hand. Last chance, Blackthorn. Give me the evidence or I'll take it. Try. The tension in the room was suffocating. Lydia looked between the two men, saw the violence coiled in both of them, ready to spring. Edward, don't do this, she said. Not here. Not in Parliament itself. Why not? Who's going to stop me? The Prime Minister? Edward laughed. Lydia, you really don't understand how power works. The Prime Minister answers to people like me. We fund his campaigns, we support his policies, we make sure the machinery of government runs smoothly. He's not going to help you. No one is. Then we'll make enough noise that someone has to pay attention. Will you? Because right now all I see is a disgraced traitor and a foolish girl who believed his lies. No one will care what you have to say. No one will even listen. He was probably right. The realization hit Lydia like cold water. They'd come here thinking truth mattered, thinking evidence was enough. But Edward was right. Power determined which truths got heard and which got buried. So what happens now? She asked quietly. You kill us? Make us disappear like you did to Thomas Brennan? Edward's expression flickered. Thomas Brennan's death was an accident. A genuine accident. He panicked, tried to run, fell into the Thames before my people could stop him. I didn't want that. I tried to pay him off, tried to make him understand he was safer keeping quiet. But he wouldn't. No, he had principles. Like you. Edward's voice softened slightly. I don't want to hurt you, Lydia. You're my sister. I've spent my whole life trying to protect you. But you're making it impossible. By wanting the truth? By refusing to understand that sometimes the truth is less important than survival. Less important than preserving what we've built. He took a step closer. Think about what you're throwing away. Your reputation, your future, your place in society. For what? For him? He gestured at Rowan with contempt. A man you barely know? A man who's using you to get revenge? He's not using me. Isn't he? Look at yourself, Lydia. You're standing in Parliament wearing a blood-stained dress, holding stolen documents, threatening to destroy your own family. Is this who you want to be? The question hit harder than she expected. Lydia looked down at her ruined clothes, felt the weight of everything she'd done in the past week. The lies, the theft, the violence. She'd shot a man. Watched another die. Betrayed her own brother. Had it all been for justice, or had Edward been right from the start? Had Rowan simply used her anger and idealism for his own purposes? Don't listen to him, Rowan said quietly. He's trying to make you doubt yourself. Am I? Edward's voice was reasonable, concerned. Or am I the only one being honest with you? Lydia, I know you think you're fighting for something noble. But this man, he pointed at Rowan, this man has nothing left to lose. He's already lost everything, but you haven't. Not yet. You still have a chance to walk away from this. Lydia looked at Rowan, saw the tension in his jaw, the desperation he was trying to hide, saw a man balanced on a knife's edge between vindication and destruction, saw someone who needed her. I'm not walking away, she said. Edward's face hardened. Then you leave me no choice. He nodded to the men by the door. They moved forward, and Lydia saw the glint of weapons. Not guns, too obvious in Parliament, but truncheons, knives, things that could kill quietly. Rowan shoved the portfolio at Lydia. Run! I'm not leaving you. Run! He launched himself at the nearest man, and chaos erupted. Lydia clutched the portfolio and ran for the door, but Pemberton blocked her path, his expression coldly amused. Going somewhere, Miss Everhart? She tried to dodge past him, but he was faster than he looked. His hand closed on her wrist, painful and precise. Let her go. Edward's voice, sharp with command. Pemberton looked surprised. But I said let her go. She's my sister. I won't have her hurt. Edward, if she leaves with that evidence, she won't leave. Will you, Lydia? Lydia stared at her brother. Behind him, Rowan was struggling with two men, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. He was fighting hard, but he was outnumbered and exhausted. Give me the portfolio, Edward said. Give it to me and I'll let him live. You have my word. Your word. Lydia's voice was bitter. What's that worth? More than his life, apparently. Choose quickly. They're going to kill him in about 30 seconds. She looked at Rowan, saw him go down under a blow to the kidneys, saw him struggle back to his feet with pure stubborn will, saw the moment he understood what was about to happen and shook his head violently. Don't! He gasped. Lydia, don't give it to him. One of the men hit him again, harder. Rowan's legs buckled. Lydia made her decision. She held out the portfolio. Edward took it with visible relief. Thank you. I know that wasn't easy. If you hurt him, I won't. You have my word. He turned to his men. Let him go. They released Rowan, who staggered but stayed upright through sheer force of will. His eyes found Lydia's across the room, and she saw betrayal there, sharp and cutting. Why? He asked hoarsely. Because you're worth more than revenge, she said simply. Edward was already leafing through the portfolio, checking the contents. His expression shifted from relief to confusion to alarm. These aren't… Where are the originals? Originals? Lydia kept her voice steady. Those are the originals. Don't lie to me. These documents, they're copies. Recent copies. The ink's barely dry. He grabbed her arm. Where are the real ones? Lydia smiled. It felt dangerous and wild, nothing like the polite expression she'd worn her whole life. Did you really think we'd bring the only copy straight to you? We're not that stupid, Edward. His grip tightened until pain shot up her arm. Where are they? Safe. With someone you can't touch. And if anything happens to us, if we don't report back within the hour, those documents go to every newspaper in London simultaneously. It was a complete bluff. They'd made one hasty set of copies at the lodge that morning, working by dim firelight, and she had no idea if the copies were even legible. But Edward didn't know that. You're lying, he said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Am I? Are you willing to risk it? For a long moment, they stood frozen in a tableau of mutual destruction, brother and sister, trust shattered beyond repair, both holding weapons they weren't sure would fire. Then the door burst open. A man in official robes entered, flanked by parliamentary guards. What in blazes is going on here? We have reports of violence. He stopped, taking in the scene. Lord Everhart? What's the meaning of this? Edward's expression smoothed into the practiced charm Lydia knew so well. A family dispute, I'm afraid. My sister has fallen in with unsavory company. We were attempting to resolve the matter privately. Privately? In the Palace of Westminster? The official looked at Rowan's bloody face, Lydia's torn dress, the tension crackling through the room. This looks like assault to me. It's a misunderstanding, Pemberton interjected, simply emotions running high. I'm being held against my will, Lydia said clearly. My brother and his associates have threatened us with violence if we don't surrender evidence of their corruption. The official's eyebrows rose. That's quite an accusation, Miss Everhart, Lydia Everhart, and I have proof. She's confused, Edward said smoothly. She's been under strain lately, not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. For the first time in my life, actually. Lydia pulled away from Edward's grip. And I'm exercising my right as a British citizen to report a crime to the proper authorities. Unless that right doesn't exist in Parliament itself? The official looked uncomfortable. This was clearly well above his usual duties of maintaining order during debates. Perhaps we should discuss this in a more private setting. No more private settings, Rowan said. His voice was rough but steady. No more backroom deals and quiet arrangements. If we're doing this, we do it publicly. This is absurd, Pemberton snapped. We're members of Parliament, for heaven's sake. You can't seriously think we're going to be interrogated like common criminals based on the ravings of a disgraced traitor and a hysterical woman. Wrong words. Lydia saw several of the guards stiffen at that. Whatever else they were British men raised to respect women, and Pemberton's contempt was obvious. "The lady doesn't seem hysterical to me," one guard said quietly. The official cleared his throat. "Be that as it may, there are proper channels for accusations of this nature. If Miss Everhart wishes to file a formal complaint, I do. Then she should do so through the appropriate offices, not by creating a disturbance in Parliament itself. And those appropriate offices," Edward said, "will review her claims thoroughly and impartially. In the meantime, perhaps it's best if everyone goes home and calms down." It was slipping away. Lydia could feel it. Edward's influence, his connections, his polish, it was all working to diffuse the situation, to sweep everything back under the rug where it had been festering. "I have evidence," she said desperately. "Documents proving embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy." "Documents that could be forged," Pemberton said. "Documents provided by a convicted criminal with every reason to lie." "I was never convicted," Rowan said. "A technicality. The law is built on technicalities." The official raised his hands. "Enough. This is neither the time nor place for such discussions. Miss Everhart, if you wish to make a formal complaint, I can direct you to so—" "She doesn't wish to make a complaint," Edward interrupted. "She's had a shock. She's not herself. I'll take her home and we can forget this unfortunate incident ever happened." "Like hell you will!" Charlotte's voice cut through the room like a knife. Everyone turned. Lydia's cousin stood in the doorway, resplendent in emerald green, her blonde hair perfectly arranged, looking like she'd just come from a garden party. Behind her were at least a dozen women, society women, women whose names appeared in all the right papers, whose opinions shaped London's drawing rooms. "Charlotte," Lydia's voice came out weak with relief. "What are you doing here? What does it look like, rescuing you, again?" Charlotte swept into the room with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. "Ladies, if you would." The women fanned out, creating a barrier between Lydia and Edward's men. They didn't look frightened or intimidated. They looked coldly furious. "Lady Charlotte," Edward said carefully, "this is a family matter, is it? Because it looks to me like you're threatening your sister in a public building with multiple witnesses. That's not a family matter, Lord Everhart. That's a scandal." "I'm doing no such thing." "Really? Because I have at least 15 women who will swear they saw otherwise. Do you know what happens when 15 respectable ladies all tell the same story? People believe it, even when powerful men tell them not to." Edward's face went pale. "You're making a mistake." "No, Edward. You made the mistake." Charlotte's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "You underestimated your sister. You assumed she'd be easy to control, easy to silence. But Lydia has something you'll never understand. She actually believes in the things you only pretend to value. Honor, justice, truth. This is none of your concern. It became my concern the moment you threatened my cousin. Now here's what's going to happen. Lydia and Mr. Blackthorne are going to leave. They're going to take their evidence to whoever they choose, and you're going to let them go without interference." "Or what?" Charlotte smiled. It was a beautiful, terrible thing. "Or every woman in this room writes to everyone she knows describing what we witnessed here today. By tonight, every drawing room in London will be buzzing with the story of how Lord Everhart tried to intimidate his own sister in Parliament, how he used violence against an unarmed woman, how he— You can't prove any of that. I don't have to prove it. I just have to say it. Welcome to the power of gossip, Edward. It's not as dramatic as political conspiracy, but it's just as effective at destroying lives." She looked at the other women. "Ladies, shall we escort Miss Everhart and Mr. Blackthorne to safety?" They moved as a group surrounding Lydia and Rowan, creating a wall of respectability that even Edward couldn't breach without making everything infinitely worse. The official looked helplessly between Edward and the sudden invasion of aristocratic women. This is highly irregular." "So file a complaint," Charlotte said sweetly, "through the appropriate channels. In the meantime, we're leaving." They processed out of Parliament like a royal procession, Charlotte at the head, Lydia and Rowan protected in the center, the other women forming a defensive perimeter.
People stared, whispered, but no one tried to stop them. On the steps outside, Lydia finally let herself breathe. "How did you know?" she asked Charlotte. "I didn't, but I know you, and I know when you're about to do something impossibly brave and stupid. So I gathered some friends who owed me favors and came to make sure you didn't get yourself killed." Charlotte squeezed her hand. "You're welcome, by the way." "Thank you doesn't seem adequate." "No, it doesn't. You'll be paying this debt off for years." But Charlotte was smiling. "Now, what's the plan? Because Edward's not going to let this go. He'll regroup, come at you from a different angle." "We need to get the real documents published," Rowan said, "fast before they have time to create a counter-narrative." "The Times wouldn't touch it," one of the women said. She was older, gray-haired, with shrewd eyes. "Too risky. They'd be sued into oblivion." "What about the radical papers?" another suggested. "The ones that already hate the aristocracy." "They'd publish it, but no one would believe them," Charlotte said. "Everyone knows they print sensationalized nonsense. We need someone respectable but independent, someone with nothing to lose and everything to gain from a big story." Lydia's mind raced. The Morning Chronicle. They've been losing subscribers to the Times for years.
They're desperate for something to put them back on top. "That could work," Rowan said slowly, "if we can get to them before Edward does." "I know someone there," one of Charlotte's friends offered. "My nephew works in their printing office. I can get you a meeting with the editor." "When?" "This afternoon, if we hurry." They scattered, each woman heading in a different direction to confuse anyone trying to follow. Lydia and Rowan were bundled into Charlotte's carriage, which took off at dangerous speed through London's crowded streets. "That was too close," Rowan said, leaning back against the seat. Blood still trickled from the cut above his eye. If Charlotte hadn't arrived when she did— But she did. Lydia found a handkerchief, started dabbing at his wound. "Stop moving. You're making it worse." "It's fine." "It's not fine. None of this is fine. We almost died back there." "But we didn't." His hand came up to catch hers, stilling her movements. "And we have the evidence. We're going to win, Lydia." "Are we?" "Because from where I'm sitting, we just made every powerful man in London our enemy. That doesn't feel like winning." "It's not about winning. It's about not losing who we are in the fight." Charlotte snorted from her seat across from them. "How inspiring. Very poetic. Meanwhile, in the real world, you two need to disappear for a while. After the story breaks, Edward and his friends will be looking for revenge." "Where would we go?" Lydia asked. "I have a cottage in Scotland. Remote, defensible, no neighbors for miles. You could hide there until things settle down." "Things aren't going to settle down," Rowan said. "Once we publish this evidence, it'll be war." "Then you'd better be prepared to fight it." The carriage pulled up outside a nondescript building in Fleet Street. Through the grimy windows, Lydia could see printing presses, stacks of paper, men in ink-stained aprons rushing about with the frantic energy of a newspaper on deadline. "This is it," Charlotte said. "Your one shot at making this story heard. Don't waste it." They climbed out. The portfolio felt impossibly heavy in Rowan's hands. Inside, the Chronicle's offices smelled of ink and hot metal and desperation. A harried clerk tried to turn them away until Charlotte mentioned her friend's nephew. Then they were ushered upstairs to a cramped office where a middle-aged man with spectacular mutton chops looked up from a desk covered in proofs. "I don't have time for whatever you're selling," he said without preamble. "We're not selling anything," Lydia said. "We're giving you the biggest story of the year." "That's what everyone says." "Everyone isn't offering proof of corruption at the highest levels of government. Proof that members of parliament have been embezzling money meant for the military. Proof that they destroyed an innocent man to cover their crimes." The editor, his nameplate read James Crawford, finally looked up with real interest. "What kind of proof?" Rowan opened the portfolio, spread the documents across the desk. "Bank records, correspondence, contracts, everything you need to prove the story." Crawford began reading. His expression shifted from skepticism to shock to something like hunger. "Where did you get these?" "Does it matter?" "It matters if they're forgeries." "They're not. And we have witnesses willing to testify." "Who?" "Thomas Brennan's sister, for one. Several clerks at the War Office, who were too frightened to speak before. A few others." Crawford kept reading, his hands shaking slightly. Do you understand what you're handing me? If I publish this, if these allegations are true, this could bring down the government.
The allegations are true, Lydia said. And yes, we understand exactly what we're giving you. Why the Chronicle? Why not the Times or the Post? Because they're too comfortable, Rowan said. Too invested in the status quo. You're hungry. You want to matter again. This story will make you matter. Crawford looked between them, this battered duke and this determined young woman, and seemed to see something that convinced him. All right, he said, I'll publish it. Front page tomorrow morning. But I need you to understand the consequences. The men you're accusing will come after you with everything they have. Legal action, physical threats, character assassination. They'll destroy you if they can. They already destroyed me once, Rowan said. I'm still here.
And you, Miss Everhart? Are you prepared for what's coming? Lydia thought about Edward's face in Parliament, thought about the comfortable life she was throwing away, thought about all the lies she'd believed and all the truths she'd discovered. Yes, she said, I'm prepared. Crawford nodded slowly. Then we have a deal. Leave the documents with me. I'll have my best reporters verify everything, cross-check sources, make sure it's airtight. No one will be able to dismiss this as slander. They left the portfolio, their only copy of the evidence, their only weapon, in the hands of a stranger and walked back out into the London afternoon. Now what? Lydia asked. Now we wait, Charlotte said, and hope Crawford's as honest as he seems. They went to Charlotte's townhouse, where she installed them in a guest room and ordered them to rest while she stood guard. Lydia tried to sleep, but couldn't. Her mind kept racing, playing out scenarios, imagining Edward's reaction when he saw the morning paper. Night fell. The city outside grew quiet. Around midnight, Rowan appeared in her doorway. Can't sleep either? She asked. No. He came in, closed the door softly. Keeps thinking about what happens next, after the story breaks. After everyone knows what Edward did. You mean after everyone knows what I did? You saved my life today, probably several times over. You would have done the same. Yes, but that doesn't make it less remarkable. He sat beside her on the bed, close but not touching. You know you can't go back, right? Even if we win, even if Edward goes to prison, you'll never be accepted by society again. They'll call you a traitor to your class. Let them. I never fit there anyway. But you could have. You could have married well, lived comfortably, been safe. Safety's overrated. She looked at him. What about you? After this is over, after you've gotten your justice, what then? I don't know. I've spent 5 years thinking about nothing but revenge. Never thought past it. Maybe it's time to start. Before he could respond, the door burst open. Charlotte stood there, her face pale. Get up, get dressed. We need to leave now. What's wrong? The Chronicle's office is on fire. Someone torched it an hour ago. Crawford barely got out alive. Lydia felt ice flood her veins. The documents. Gone. All of it. The evidence, the proofs, everything. No. Rowan was on his feet. They can't be gone. We had copies. The copies are ashes now. Charlotte's voice was flat. Edward must have suspected we'd go to a newspaper. He had people watching, and the moment they saw where we went, he burned it down. Lydia's voice sounded distant to her own ears. He burned it all down. The good news is Crawford already sent telegrams to several other papers summarizing the story before the fire, so people know something's coming. The bad news is without physical evidence, it's just allegations. Edward can deny everything, call it a smear campaign. So we're back where we started, Rowan said, except now they know we're serious. Worse than that. Charlotte moved to the window, peering through the curtains. There are men outside, watching the house. I count at least 6. Lydia joined her at the window. Sure enough, dark figures loitered in the street below, not even trying to be subtle anymore. How long have they been there? 10 minutes, maybe. They're waiting for reinforcements, I think. Once they have enough men, they'll come in. Then we leave now, Rowan said. Out the back, through the gardens. They'll have people there too. Then through the roof, down the fire stairs. I don't care how. We're not staying here to be cornered. Charlotte pulled a pistol from her desk drawer. I never thought I'd need this for anything but intimidating amorous callers. Turns out it's useful for this too. They moved fast, gathering what little they had, preparing to run. Lydia felt strangely calm. Past the fear, past the panic, into some clear, cold place where only action mattered. They made it halfway down the servants' stairs before the front door exploded inward. Shouts, heavy footsteps, the sound of furniture being overturned. "They're searching the house," Charlotte whispered, "looking for us." "This way." Rowan led them down a narrow passage that opened into the kitchen. Through the window, Lydia could see more men in the back garden, trapped. "The cellar," Charlotte said. "There's a tunnel. It connects to the house next door. My grandfather had it built during some paranoid phase. I've never actually used it. Now's the time." They scrambled down into darkness, Charlotte leading them by memory through cramped passages that smelled of mold and earth. Behind them, footsteps thundered on the floor above, voices calling for them. The tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for one person. Lydia scraped her shoulders on rough stone, felt water seeping through her shoes. Somewhere above, she heard muffled shouts. They'd found the cellar entrance. "Faster," Rowan urged. Charlotte was struggling, her elaborate dress catching on every projection. She stumbled, nearly fell. Lydia caught her. "Leave me," Charlotte gasped. "You're faster without—" "Not a chance." They burst out of the tunnel into another cellar, this one empty and echoing. Charlotte led them up stairs that creaked alarmingly, through a house that was clearly abandoned, out into an alley that stank of garbage and despair. Behind them, the sound of pursuit. They ran through London's back streets, 3 fugitives fleeing from the forces of order itself. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every sound could be the approach of violence. Lydia's lungs burned, her legs trembled, but she kept moving, kept following Rowan's broad back through the maze of the city. Finally, gasping, they collapsed in the shelter of a church doorway. "We need to split up," Rowan said. "They're looking for all 3 of us together. If we separate—" "No." Lydia's voice was firm despite her exhaustion. "We stay together. That's not negotiable." "Lydia, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. Separated, they can pick us off one by one. Together, we have a chance." Charlotte coughed, trying to catch her breath. "She's right. Also, I refuse to die alone in some gutter. If I'm going down, I'm taking company." Rowan looked like he wanted to argue, but footsteps echoed from nearby streets. Lots of them, organized, methodical, closing in. "They're sweeping the area," he said quietly. "They'll find us in minutes. Then we need a place to hide, somewhere they won't look." "Where?" "Edward knows everywhere I might go. Every friend, every contact, every safe house." Lydia's mind raced, thought about London, about all its hidden places, about where someone could vanish. "The docks," she said. "The shipping warehouses. They're always full of cargo, workers, chaos. We could lose ourselves there." "It's a mile away. We'll never make it." "We have to try." They ran again, desperation lending speed to tired legs. The city rushed past in a blur of gas lamps and dark windows. Lydia's side ached, her breath came in ragged gasps, but she kept moving. The docks emerged from the darkness like salvation, massive warehouses looming against the night sky, the Thames rolling past in oily darkness, ships' masts swaying like a forest of dead trees. They dove into the maze of cargo and cranes, losing themselves in the shadows, found a space between stacked crates where they could hide and rest. For a few minutes, they just breathed, grateful to be still, grateful to be alive. "What now?" Charlotte asked. "We can't hide here forever. Eventually someone will find us." "We need new evidence," Rowan said. "We need to go back to the source, the War Office itself. Break in if we have to. Get the original documents that Thomas Brennan was working from." "That's suicide." "Maybe, but it's the only option we have left." Lydia started to respond, but froze. Footsteps. Not the random sounds of dock workers, but purposeful, organized, searching. They'd been found. Edward emerged from the shadows with a dozen men behind him. His face was carved from stone, all pretense of brotherly concern abandoned. "It's over, Lydia," he said. "Come out. I promise I'll make it quick." Lydia's hand found the pistol in her pocket. Her fingers closed around the grip, slick with sweat. The weapon felt heavier than before, weighted with what it meant to use it, not in panicked self-defense this time, but deliberately, with full knowledge of the cost. You won't shoot me, Edward said, reading her intention. You're not that person. You don't know who I am anymore. Don't I? You're my sister. I've known you since you were born. You cried for a week when your pet rabbit died. You can't even kill spiders without feeling guilty. He took a step closer. You're not a killer, Lydia. Neither is Blackthorn, for all his posturing. You're just people who got in over your heads. Behind the crates, Rowan's hand found hers, squeezed once. She felt the tremor in his fingers, understood what it cost him to stay still when everything in him screamed to fight. What do you want, Edward? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The same thing I've always wanted, to protect this family, to protect you. He spread his hands, the picture of reasonableness. Come home, both of you. We'll say you were deceived, manipulated. Society will forgive you eventually, better than the alternative. Which is? Don't make me spell it out. Charlotte laughed, sharp and brittle. He's going to kill us, Lydia. Stop pretending this ends any other way. Edward's expression flickered with something that might have been genuine regret. I don't want to, but you've left me no choice. You've made yourself a threat. Threats get eliminated. Like Thomas Brennan? Rowan's voice cut through the darkness. Was he a threat too? Thomas was a fool who didn't understand the game he was playing, just like you. Edward's patience was wearing thin. This is your last chance. Come quietly, or my men take you by force. Either way, this ends tonight. You're right about one thing, Lydia said. This does end tonight, just not the way you think. She stood, the pistol raised but not aimed directly at Edward. Behind her, Rowan and Charlotte rose too, forming a united front. What are you going to do? Shoot your way out? Edward gestured at his men, all armed, all positioned. You're outnumbered. You're exhausted. You have nowhere to run. We don't need to run. Lydia's heart hammered, but her hand was steady. We just need to stall. Stall for what? A whistle cut through the night, sharp, piercing, the kind police use to signal each other. Edward's head snapped toward the sound. What did you... More whistles, dozens of them, coming from all directions. Footsteps, lots of them, organized and rapid. You didn't think Crawford was the only newspaper we talked to, did you? Charlotte's smile was vicious. While you were burning down the Chronicle, we were sending telegrams to every major paper in England, summarizing the story, giving them just enough to know something big was breaking. They've had reporters following this all night. You're bluffing. Am I? Look around, Edward. How many witnesses do you think are watching right now? Figures emerged from the shadows. Not Edward's men, but others. Men with notepads, with cameras, with the hungry expressions of journalists who'd scented blood in the water. They'd been following the chase through London streets, documenting everything, waiting for the confrontation. And now they had it. Lord Everhart, one of them called out. Is it true you ordered the destruction of the Chronicle's offices? Did you embezzle funds from the War Office? What's your response to allegations of conspiracy and murder? The questions came like bullets. Edward's face went white, then red, then white again. This is slander, he said. Lies spread by a disgraced criminal. Then why are you here with armed men? Another reporter demanded. Why are you threatening your own sister? I'm not threatening. She's confused. She needs help. She looks pretty clear-headed to me. Edward's men were shifting uncomfortably, aware of the witnesses, aware that violence now would be documented and spread across every paper in England by morning. The advantage of secrecy, of operating in shadows, had evaporated. You planned this, Edward said, looking at Lydia with something like admiration mixed with his fury. The tunnel, the run through the streets, leading us here. You wanted witnesses. We needed them. Your power comes from operating in darkness, so we dragged everything into the light. Lydia lowered the pistol slightly. It's over, Edward. Even if you kill us now, the story's already out there. These men will print what they've seen. By morning, all of London will know what you did. They'll know lies. They'll know enough to start asking questions. And once people start questioning, the whole house of cards collapses. Rowan moved forward, positioning himself between Lydia and Edward's men. We don't need perfect evidence anymore. We just need doubt. And doubt spreads faster than truth ever could. Edward stood frozen, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Lydia watched emotions play across his face: rage, fear, desperation, calculation. She knew that look. He was trying to find an angle, a way to spin this, to salvage something from the wreckage. "You've destroyed yourself too," he said finally. "You realize that? Even if I go down, you'll never be accepted anywhere. You're a traitor to your class, Lydia. History won't remember you kindly." "I don't care about history. I care about being able to look at myself in the mirror." "How noble!" Edward's voice dripped contempt. "And when you're living in poverty, shunned by everyone you've ever known, will nobility keep you warm?" "Maybe not, but at least I'll be free." The word hung in the air. Free. Such a simple concept, but loaded with everything she'd been fighting for. Freedom from lies, from compromise, from the suffocating expectations of a society built on appearances. Lord Pemberton appeared from behind Edward, his face twisted with fury. "Enough of this. Kill them now, witnesses or not. We can't let them—" "Shut up." Edward's voice was sharp. "Just shut up, Pemberton." "But—" "I said shut up." Edward whirled on him. "This is your fault. You and Morrison and all the others who were too greedy, too stupid to know when to stop. I told you Thomas Brennan should have been paid off properly, not scared. I told you burning the Chronicle was excessive. But you didn't listen, and now look where we are." Pemberton's face purpled. "Don't you dare blame this on who else should I blame it? You pushed for violence at every turn. You escalated when we should have de-escalated. And now we're standing in front of half the journalists in London with no way out." They were turning on each other. Lydia watched, fascinated and horrified, as the alliance fractured under pressure. This was how corrupt systems fell, not from external attack, but from internal collapse when everyone tried to save themselves. "Gentlemen," one of the reporters called out, "are you admitting to the charges?" "I'm admitting nothing," Edward snapped. "This entire situation has been manufactured by people with axes to grind. When this goes to trial, if it goes to trial, we'll see who the real criminals are." "So you're not denying there will be a trial?" Edward's jaw worked. He'd walked right into that trap. "The truth will come out in proper legal proceedings," he said stiffly, "not in ambush interviews at the docks." "But you're acknowledging there's something to investigate." "I'm acknowledging nothing further without my solicitor present." It was a retreat. Not surrender, but acknowledgement that he couldn't fight this battle here, now, in front of witnesses. Edward gestured to his men, and they began backing away slowly, keeping their weapons visible, but not threatening. Before leaving, Edward looked at Lydia one last time. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "You may have won tonight, but the war is just beginning, and wars are expensive. You have no money, no position, no allies except these people." He gestured at the journalist dismissively. "They'll drop you the moment a better story comes along. What will you do then?" "Whatever I have to." "So will I." He turned and walked away, his men following, disappearing into the maze of warehouses. The journalists swarmed immediately, shouting questions, demanding statements. Lydia found herself surrounded by eager faces, notepads at the ready, everyone wanting their piece of the story. "Miss Everhart, is it true your brother conspired to destroy Rowan Blackthorne? Can you prove the allegations of embezzlement? What's your relationship with the former Duke?" The questions came too fast to answer. Lydia felt overwhelmed, drowning in attention after a lifetime of being ignored. Then Rowan's hand was on her shoulder, steadying. "That's enough. Miss Everhart will make a formal statement tomorrow, once she's had time to rest. For now, she's been through enough." "Just one question." "I said that's enough." His voice carried command, the authority of someone used to being obeyed. The journalists backed off slightly, though their pens kept moving, recording everything. Charlotte pushed through the crowd. "I have a carriage waiting 2 streets over. We should go before Edward changes his mind about retreat." They made their way through the reporters, who followed like hungry dogs but kept a respectful distance now that the immediate drama had passed. True to her word, Charlotte had a carriage ready, driver alert, and ready to move. Once inside, Lydia finally let herself collapse, the adrenaline draining away and leaving exhaustion in its wake. "We did it," she said wonderingly. "We actually did it." "We survived," Rowan corrected. "That's not the same as winning." "He's right," Charlotte said. "Edward will regroup. He'll hire the best lawyers, call in every favor, use every connection. This fight is far from over. But we've shifted the ground it's fought on. No more shadows, no more quiet arrangements. Everything happens in public now where people can see. Lydia looked at Rowan. That was your goal, wasn't it? Not just to destroy Edward, but to force the whole system into the light? I wanted revenge. I'll admit that. But somewhere along the way, he paused, seeming to search for words. Somewhere along the way, it became about more than just me. About making sure this couldn't happen to anyone else. How touching, Charlotte said. Now, while you're having your moment of moral clarity, where exactly are we going? Because this carriage can't drive in circles forever. The War Office, Lydia said. We still need the original documents. Thomas Brennan's evidence was destroyed, but the source material must still exist somewhere in their archives. Breaking into the War Office. Of course, why not? Charlotte leaned back against the seat. At this point, what's one more crime? It's not breaking in if we have permission, and I think I know someone who might help us. Rowan looked skeptical. Who? General Morrison, one of the men involved in the conspiracy. He's been quiet through all this, letting Edward and Pemberton take the lead. That suggests either wisdom or guilt, and I'm gambling on guilt. Guilty men can be convinced to turn on their partners if they think it'll save them. That's a dangerous gamble. Everything we've done has been dangerous. Why stop now? They drove through pre-dawn London to Morrison's townhouse in Belgravia, one of the elegant streets where wealth whispered rather than shouted. The general's home was dark except for a single light in an upstairs window. He's awake, Lydia noted. Probably couldn't sleep, Charlotte said, knowing the whole scheme is unraveling, wondering when it's his turn to fall. They approached the door. Lydia knocked, not loudly, but with persistence. After several minutes, a butler answered, looking scandalized at visitors at such an hour. Miss Everhart to see General Morrison. Tell him it's urgent. The general is not receiving. Tell him I have information about the War Office investigation. Tell him I'm offering him a chance to get ahead of the story before it destroys him completely. The butler looked uncertain, but retreated. They waited, tension thick, wondering if Morrison would simply refuse to see them or if desperation would win out. 5 minutes later, they were shown into a study where General Morrison sat behind a massive desk, looking every one of his 60 years. His uniform hung slightly loose, like he'd lost weight recently. His eyes were red-rimmed. You have some nerve coming here, he said without preamble. We have evidence, Lydia replied, and we have witnesses. By tomorrow, your name will be in every newspaper in England connected to embezzlement, conspiracy, and murder. Unless you help us. Help you do what? Get access to the War Office archives, the original documents that Thomas Brennan was working from when he compiled his evidence. We need them, and you can get them. Morrison laughed, a bitter sound. Why in blazes would I do that? You're trying to destroy me. We're trying to expose the truth. You can be part of that exposure, or you can be a victim of it. Rowan leaned forward. Edward and Pemberton are already turning on each other. You saw it tonight at the docks. They'll sacrifice anyone to save themselves. Right now, you're just another name on the list. But if you help us, if you provide evidence and testimony, you might be able to salvage something. Such as? Your reputation, your legacy, the chance to be remembered as the man who helped expose corruption rather than the man who enabled it. I'm already guilty. There's no escaping that. No, Lydia agreed, but there's degrees of guilt. There's the men who conceived the scheme and the men who went along with it. There's the men who tried to cover it up with violence and the men who tried to stop it. Which one are you going to be? Morrison was silent for a long time, staring at his hands. I didn't want anyone to die. When they first proposed the arrangement, it seemed harmless. Redirect some funds, make some money on the side, everyone benefits. I thought it was just efficient, practical. When did you realize it wasn't? When Thomas Brennan died. When I heard he'd fallen into the Thames and no one seemed to care about the coincidence, that's when I knew we'd crossed a line. He looked up at them. I've been waiting for someone to ask the right questions. Part of me hoped you'd succeed, actually. Better than living with this guilt forever. Then help us finish it, Lydia said softly. Help us get the evidence we need to prove everything. Morrison stood slowly, like his bones hurt. The archives are locked. Only the senior staff have keys. But I know where they keep the master set, and I know the guard rotations. If we go now, in the hour before dawn, there's a 15-minute window when only one man is on duty. Can you get us in?
I can try, but if we're caught, we're already fugitives, Rowan said. One more charge won't make much difference. They took Morrison's carriage, the general still in his dressing gown with a coat thrown over it, looking like he'd aged a decade in the past hour. As they drove through the empty streets, he told them about the scheme in quiet, factual tones, how it had started, who was involved, how the money had been hidden. There were 20 of us at first, he said. Only 5 are left active now. The others died or retired or were paid off to keep quiet. Edward was the architect. He understood how money moved through government systems better than anyone. Pemberton provided the muscle, the intimidation. I just went along, signed the papers I was told to sign, didn't ask questions. Why? Charlotte asked. You had money, position, respect. Why risk it all? Because I was tired of being honorable and poor, while others got rich cutting corners, tired of watching younger men get promoted because they had the right connections. I told myself everyone was doing it, so why shouldn't I? He laughed bitterly. The excuses we tell ourselves. The War Office loomed ahead, a fortress of bureaucracy built to withstand attacks from without. But they were attacking from within, using the system's own guardians as their weapons. Morrison led them to a side entrance, used a key that looked ancient, and got them past the first door. Inside, the building was dark and echoing, full of the particular silence of large spaces at night. The archives are in the basement, Morrison whispered. 3 levels down. Stay quiet. Sound carries. They descended through darkness, their footsteps muffled, breathing shallow. Lydia's hand stayed in her pocket, wrapped around the pistol, ready for the moment this all went wrong. At the archive entrance, Morrison used another key. The door swung open with a creak that sounded catastrophically loud in the silence. Inside, rows upon rows of shelves stretched into darkness, packed with files and documents and the recorded detritus of government operations. It was overwhelming. Where do we start? Charlotte asked.
Military contracts, 1816 to 1821, Morrison said. Section 7, rows M through R. That's where Brennan found the initial discrepancies. They split up, each taking a row, searching by the dim light of a few candles Morrison had brought. The files were dusty, disorganized, clearly not accessed in years. Perfect for hiding evidence. Lydia found the first irregularity 20 minutes in, a contract for supplying boots to the Army, signed by a company that she now recognized as one of Pemberton's shell corporations. The amounts were inflated, the deliveries never properly verified. Here, she called softly, and here, and here. They piled up documents, building the case piece by piece, every false contract, every forged approval, every payment that had been redirected. It was all here, hidden in plain sight, protected by the assumption that no one would ever look. Rowan found correspondence that made it explicit. Letters between Edward and Pemberton discussing how to handle the Blackthorn problem, how to fabricate evidence, how to ensure the trial went their way. This is it, he said, his voice tight with emotion. This proves everything. Every lie. Every crime. All of it documented. We need to copy what we can, Lydia said. Take the originals if necessary. We can't risk... Footsteps overhead. They all froze. Morrison doused the candles immediately, plunging them into darkness. Someone's here, he whispered. We need to hide. There's nowhere to hide. These rows are open. Then we need to leave. Now. But the footsteps were getting closer, descending the stairs they'd used. Multiple sets of boots, moving with military precision. They knew, Charlotte said. Someone tipped them off. We'd come here. Or they were already here, waiting, Rowan said grimly. A trap. The lights blazed on, blinding after the darkness. Lydia blinked, trying to adjust, and found herself staring at a dozen soldiers, all armed, all pointed at them. And at their head, looking entirely unsurprised to see them, stood Lord Pemberton. General Morrison, he said pleasantly, how very predictable of you. I told Edward you'd break eventually. Weak men always do. Morrison said nothing, his face gray. And Miss Everhart, Mr. Blackthorn, Lady Charlotte.
Welcome to the archives. I do hope you found what you were looking for. Pemberton gestured at the documents they'd piled up. Because those will be the last things you ever see. You can't kill us here, Lydia said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Too many witnesses, too much attention. We've made sure of that. Can't I? This is a military facility, Miss Everhart. Trespassers can be shot on sight, especially during wartime. We're not at war. Aren't we? There's always a war somewhere, and regulations written during wartime have a way of persisting long after peace breaks out. Pemberton smiled. Your bodies will be found tomorrow morning. Tragic case of burglary gone wrong. The newspapers might report it, but by then the story will have moved on. People have short memories. The reporters saw us leave with Morrison. They'll know something happened here. Will they? How? Morrison will deny it. I'll deny it, and without your bodies to prove otherwise, it's just speculation. He had an answer for everything. Lydia felt desperation clawing at her throat. They'd come so close, had gathered the evidence they needed, and now it was going to end here in a basement archive, shot by soldiers following orders. I have a question, Rowan said suddenly. If you're so confident, why not just let us go? Let us publish our evidence, let the trial happen. You have lawyers, connections, power. Why risk murdering us when you could just outmaneuver us legally? Pemberton's smile faltered. Because some things can't be risked. Such as? The truth. The words came out bitter. The full truth. Not just the financial crimes, but everything else. The things we did to protect the scheme. The people who died. The orders that came from the very top. He gestured upward toward the building above them. If all of that comes out, it doesn't just destroy us. It destroys the credibility of the government itself, and that we cannot allow. So you'll murder us to protect an institution? I'll do whatever is necessary, as I've always done. Pemberton nodded to the soldiers. Make it clean, and burn those documents afterward, all of them. The soldiers raised their rifles. Lydia grabbed Rowan's hand, felt Charlotte press against her other side. If this was the end, at least they'd face it together. Wait! Morrison's voice cut through the tension. Wait, I have something to say. Morrison, don't, Pemberton warned. I have a statement to make. For the record. The general stood straighter, finding some reserve of dignity Lydia hadn't known he possessed. I, General Arthur Morrison, do hereby confess to conspiracy, embezzlement, and fraud in relation to War Office contracts during the years 1816 to 1821. I did so willingly, with full knowledge of the illegality of my actions. I was aided in these crimes by Lord Edward Everhart, Lord Richard Pemberton, and 3 others whose names are documented in the files behind me. Shut up, Pemberton hissed. Shut up right now. I also confess that I was aware of attempts to silence witnesses through intimidation and violence. I did not participate directly in these acts, but I did nothing to stop them, which makes me complicit. Thomas Brennan's death was not an accident. Neither will these people's deaths be an accident if you kill them here tonight. Morrison, I'm warning you. Warn all you like. I'm done living with this. Morrison turned to the soldiers. These young men deserve to know what they're being ordered to do. You're not protecting your country. You're protecting corruption. You're about to murder civilians to hide the crimes of men who stole from the very soldiers you serve with. The soldiers looked uncertain. Young faces, probably recruited from poor families, taught to follow orders without question. But Morrison's words were seeds of doubt. These people broke into a military facility, Pemberton insisted. They're criminals. They're investigators. And everything they've accused us of is true. Morrison's voice was steady now, cleansed by confession. Shoot them if you want, but know that you're not following lawful orders. You're committing murder, and that will follow you for the rest of your lives. Silence. The soldiers looked at each other, at Pemberton, at Morrison. Discipline warred with conscience on their young faces. One of them, barely 20 with a country accent, lowered his rifle. I didn't sign up to kill civilians, sir. Not like this. You'll do as you're ordered, soldier. With respect, sir, I don't think I will. Another soldier lowered his weapon, then another. Within moments, half the squad had decided that following this particular order cost more than they were willing to pay. Pemberton's face went purple with rage. You're committing mutiny. You'll hang for this.
Better than living with murder, the young soldier said simply. Pemberton grabbed a rifle from the nearest man, aimed it at Lydia himself. Fine, I'll do it myself, starting with her. Rowan moved faster than she'd ever seen him move, throwing himself between the barrel and Lydia. There was a sharp crack, not a gunshot, but the sound of bone on bone as he drove his fist into Pemberton's jaw. The older man went down hard, the rifle clattering away. Rowan stood over him, breathing hard, his fist bleeding. It's over, he said. All of it. No more running, no more hiding, no more violence. We settle this in court, in public, where everyone can see. Pemberton looked up at him with pure hatred. You've destroyed everything. Do you understand that? The scandal will shake Parliament, undermine confidence in the government, potentially destabilize the entire country. Was your precious revenge worth that? Yes, Rowan said simply, because a system that requires corruption to function doesn't deserve confidence. Better to tear it down and build something honest. The soldiers who'd refused orders stepped forward, and Lydia realized what they were doing, changing sides, choosing to protect the investigators rather than the conspirators. We'll escort you out, miss, the young soldier said to Lydia. Make sure you get somewhere safe, and we'll testify to what happened here, if it comes to that. It will, she said. And thank you. You don't know what this means. I think I do, miss. My brother served in the army, died because his unit didn't have proper equipment. If these men stole the money that could have saved him, the soldier's voice went hard. They deserve whatever justice gets them. They gathered the documents, dozens of folders full of evidence, and made their way back up through the War Office. Dawn was breaking outside, painting London in shades of gold and gray. At the entrance, Charlotte summoned another carriage while Rowan and Morrison organized the evidence, making sure nothing was lost or damaged. Lydia stood apart, watching the sunrise, feeling strange and hollow. They'd won. Not completely, the trial still loomed and Edward was still free, but they'd won the first real victory. Evidence, witnesses, momentum on their side. Hey, Rowan appeared at her shoulder. You all right? I don't know. I thought I'd feel triumphant or relieved. Instead, I just feel tired. That's what winning feels like sometimes. Not glorious, just exhausting. Is it worth it? He looked at her, really looked, and she saw the answer in his eyes before he spoke. Ask me that again when this is all over. When Edward's in prison and the truth is public record and we can finally breathe without looking over our shoulders. And what will you say then? Probably that yes, it was worth it. Because you were here. Because you chose to fight when you could have walked away. Because... He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. Because you made me believe that justice was possible. I'd lost that, somewhere in exile. You gave it back. Lydia felt tears prick her eyes. I didn't give you anything. You already had it. You just needed someone to see it. Then thank you for seeing. Charlotte interrupted with a cough. Not to break up this touching moment, but we have about 15 minutes before Edward realizes what happened and comes after us again. Where exactly are we taking all this evidence? The Prime Minister, Morrison said. Directly to him, hand-delivered, with witnesses. No intermediaries, no one who can bury it. Will he see us? After what happened tonight? After newspapers have been writing about this all day? He'll see us. He won't have a choice. They loaded into the carriage, the evidence packed carefully, Morrison sitting with them like he'd already crossed some invisible line and couldn't go back. What happens to you, Lydia asked him, after all this? Prison, probably. Court-martial at minimum. I don't expect mercy. He looked out the window at London passing by. But at least I'll be able to sleep again. That's worth something. They drove to Downing Street in the growing morning light, traffic beginning to pick up. The city waking to news of scandal and confrontation at the docks. Newsboys were already hawking papers with screaming headlines about corruption and conspiracy. The tide was turning. Lydia could feel it. Public opinion, that fickle force that Edward had always been so careful to manage, was swinging against him. At number 10, they were stopped by guards who looked skeptical at this strange group demanding an audience with the Prime Minister. But Morrison's uniform and rank carried weight, and Charlotte's titled name opened doors, and Rowan's sheer presence commanded attention. Within an hour, they were sitting in an antechamber, waiting. The Prime Minister himself appeared, Lord Grayson, a practical man in his 50s who'd built his career on stability and avoiding scandal. He looked at them with undisguised wariness. "General Morrison, Miss Everhart, this had better be important." "It is, Prime Minister." Morrison gestured at the boxes of evidence. "We have proof of systematic corruption within the War Office, proof that members of Parliament conspired to embezzle funds, fabricate evidence, and murder witnesses. Proof that this conspiracy has been ongoing for over 5 years." Lord Grayson went very still. "That's a serious allegation." "Here's the proof." They began spreading documents across his desk, showing him the false contracts, the forged approvals, the correspondence that made the conspiracy explicit. The Prime Minister read in silence, his expression growing darker with each page. When he finished, he sat back heavily. "If this is real, it's real," Morrison said. "I was part of it. I can testify to all of it." "Then you realize this destroys your career, your reputation?" "I'm aware. I'm also aware that staying silent would destroy what's left of my honor. Some prices are too high." Lord Grayson studied him, then looked at Lydia and Rowan. "And you two? What's your interest in exposing this?" "Justice," Lydia said simply, "and the truth." "Noble words, they don't pay rent." "No, but they let me sleep at night." The Prime Minister almost smiled. "You sound like my wife. She's always telling me that character matters more than convenience." He tapped the documents. "If I pursue this, it will be chaos. Trials, investigations, public hearings. Half of Parliament will be under scrutiny. The government could fall." "Or it could be cleansed," Rowan said. "Show people that no one is above the law, that corruption will be punished regardless of rank or title. That might actually restore faith in government rather than destroying it." Idealist. Realist. "I've seen what happens when people lose faith in institutions. It's worse than any scandal." Lord Grayson was quiet for a long moment, weighing options, calculating risks. Finally, he nodded. "All right, I'll pursue this. Formal investigation, public hearings, the full weight of government scrutiny." He looked at them seriously. "But understand, this will be brutal. Edward Everhart has allies, people who will fight to protect him. You'll be attacked, your motives questioned, your characters destroyed. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes," Lydia said without hesitation. "Then we have an agreement." The Prime Minister stood, offered his hand first to Morrison, then to Rowan, finally to Lydia. "Thank you for bringing this forward. Regardless of how it ends, you've done your country a service." They left Downing Street in mid-morning sunlight, exhausted but triumphant. On the street below, crowds were gathering, people who'd read the morning papers, who'd heard rumors of scandal, who wanted to see what happened next. And when Lydia emerged onto the street, someone began clapping. Then another person, then another, until a whole section of the crowd was applauding. "What are they?" she began. "They're thanking you," Charlotte said, "for being willing to fight, for proving that ordinary people can stand up to power and win." "We haven't won yet." "No, but you've shown them it's possible. That's almost as important." Lydia looked at the faces in the crowd. Working people, merchants, servants, the vast majority who never got heard in Parliament, but whose lives were shaped by its decisions. They were looking at her with hope, with admiration, with something like gratitude. She'd never wanted to be a symbol, had never imagined herself as anyone's hero. But standing there in the London morning, with Rowan beside her and evidence secured and the Prime Minister committed to investigation, Lydia felt something shift inside her. Not victory, not yet, but the first real breath of freedom she'd taken in her entire life. The trial began 3 weeks later in the Central Criminal Court, and London had never seen anything like it. Every seat was filled, every corridor packed with people who'd queued since dawn for a chance to witness what the papers were calling the trial of the century. Nobles sat beside shopkeepers, ladies in silk pressed against washerwomen in threadbare wool, all united by the hunger to see powerful men answer for their crimes. Lydia sat in the witness gallery with Charlotte on one side and Rowan on the other, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. She'd testified yesterday, 6 hours of questioning that had left her wrung out and exhausted. The defense lawyers had been brutal, attacking her character, her motives, her relationship with Rowan. They'd painted her as a foolish girl manipulated by a vengeful criminal, someone who'd betrayed her own brother out of misplaced idealism. She'd held her ground, answered every question honestly, refused to be shaken even when they'd suggested she was mentally unstable, morally compromised, or simply lying for attention. The newspapers had been kinder, most of them anyway. The Morning Chronicle, rebuilt from its ashes with insurance money and public donations, had portrayed her as a hero. The woman who stood against corruption, one headline proclaimed. Others were less flattering, calling her a traitor, a disgrace, questioning what kind of woman would destroy her own family. She tried not to read any of them. Today was Edward's turn on the stand. He sat in the witness box looking every inch the wrong gentleman, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, the very picture of wounded dignity. The prosecution had been hammering him for 2 days now, but he hadn't cracked, hadn't slipped. He was good at this, always had been. Lord Everhart, the prosecutor said, a stern woman named Margaret Ashford who'd made her reputation destroying corrupt officials. You claim you had no knowledge of the false contracts, the embezzled funds, the systematic fraud occurring under your direct supervision? That's correct. I trusted my subordinates to handle details. Clearly, that trust was misplaced. How convenient. And Thomas Brennan's death, another thing you knew nothing about? I was informed it was an accident. I had no reason to doubt that. Even though he died the same week he was scheduled to testify about irregularities in your department? Coincidences happen, Miss Ashford. Indeed they do. Rather frequently around you, it seems. She held up a document. Do you recognize this letter? Edward's eyes flickered, just for a moment, but Lydia saw it. Recognition and fear. I'd need to see it more closely. Ashford brought it to him, watched his face as he read. Well? This appears to be correspondence between myself and Lord Pemberton discussing administrative matters. Administrative matters. Is that what you call planning how to handle the Blackthorn problem? How to ensure he doesn't become an obstacle? That's being taken out of context. Then please provide the context. Edward's jaw tightened. Mr. Blackthorn was making wild accusations, disrupting operations. We were discussing how to address his concerns through proper channels. By fabricating evidence against him? By destroying his reputation? By forcing him into exile? I did no such thing. No? Then how do you explain these? Ashford produced a stack of documents. Bank records showing payments from your personal accounts to witnesses who testified against Mr. Blackthorn. Forged contracts with your signature, authenticated by handwriting experts. Letters discussing how to manipulate the investigation. Those could be forgeries themselves. All of them? Dozens of documents, multiple witnesses, all somehow coordinated to frame you? Ashford's voice was scalpel sharp. That's quite the conspiracy, Lord Everhart. One might even call it paranoid. Edward's composure was cracking. Lydia watched, fascinated and horrified, as the mask slipped and she saw the desperation underneath. You don't understand the pressure I was under, he said. The expectations, the debts, the need to maintain our position. I did what I thought was necessary. To steal from your country, to destroy an innocent man, to survive. The words burst out of him. To keep this family from ruin, to preserve what our father built. Lydia doesn't understand that. She's never had to make those decisions, never had to choose between honor and necessity. So you admit it. You did participate in the conspiracy. Edward realized his mistake too late. That's not what I meant. You just confessed to the court that you made decisions between honor and necessity. What decisions were those, Lord Everhart, if not the crimes you're accused of? I want to consult with my lawyer. Answer the question. I invoke my right to— You already answered it. Ashford turned to the judge. No further questions, Your Honor. The witness has convicted himself. The courtroom erupted. The judge hammered his gavel, calling for order, but the damage was done. Edward sat in the witness box looking stunned, like he couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Lydia felt Charlotte's hand find hers, squeezed tight. It's almost over, her cousin whispered. But it wasn't. Not quite. The defense called character witnesses, Men who spoke of Edward's service, his dedication, his years of honorable work. They painted a picture of a man who'd made mistakes under pressure, who deserved mercy, who'd suffered enough. Then they called Lydia. She stood on shaking legs as the defense lawyer, a silver-haired man named Bartholomew Keene, approached with the smile of a shark. "Miss Everhart, you've painted quite the picture of your brother as a villain, but I wonder, is this really about justice, or is it about something more personal?" "I don't understand the question." "Your brother controlled the family finances after your father died, correct? Made decisions about your allowance, your prospects, your future?" "Yes, but must have been frustrating, being dependent on a brother who expected you to behave a certain way, marry a certain type of man. When Mr. Blackthorne appeared with his allegations, you saw an opportunity, didn't you? A chance to hurt the brother who'd controlled you." "That's not true." "Isn't it? You were seen entering Mr. Blackthorne's hotel room at night, alone, unchaperoned. You went with him to unsafe parts of London. You've been living with him these past weeks without benefit of marriage. This isn't about corruption, Miss Everhart. This is about a young woman rebelling against family authority by any means necessary." Heat flooded Lydia's face. "My relationship with Rowan has nothing to do with—" "So you admit there is a relationship, a romantic one?" "I admit I care about him, but that doesn't change the evidence. Evidence gathered while you were emotionally compromised. Evidence that conveniently paints your brother as a monster and your lover as a hero. How objective can that be? The bank records are real. The letters are real. The testimony from General Morrison is real. My feelings don't change facts." "But they change how you interpret those facts, don't they? A less biased observer might see a brother trying to protect his department from a disgruntled employee. Might see legitimate concern rather than conspiracy. But you wanted to believe the worst, so you did." Lydia's hands clenched on the railing. "I believed the evidence. I followed where it led. If that's bias, then every investigator in England is biased. Most investigators don't sleep with their witnesses." Rowan was on his feet. "Objection! She's not on trial here." "Sit down, Mr. Blackthorne," the judge said wearily. "Mr. Keene, you're testing my patience. Get to a question or move on." Keene smiled. "Of course, Your Honor. Miss Everhart, do you hate your brother?" The question landed like a punch. Lydia looked at Edward sitting at the defense table, his face carefully blank. Thought about their childhood, about the brother who'd taught her to ride horses and brought her books when she was sick, about the man who'd threatened to kill Rowan, who'd ordered the Chronicle burned, who'd put power before principle again and again. "No," she said quietly. "I don't hate him. I pity him." "Pity?" "He had everything, position, respect, the ability to do real good in the world, and he threw it all away for money and fear. That's not someone to hate, that's someone to mourn." Edward flinched. It was small, barely visible, but Lydia saw it. "No further questions," Keene said, sounding disappointed. The prosecution got its rebuttal, bringing forth General Morrison to confirm every detail of the conspiracy. His testimony was devastating, calm, factual, unflinching. He described how the scheme had worked, who'd been involved, how they'd covered their tracks. "Why are you testifying?" Ashford asked him. "You're implicating yourself in serious crimes." "Because I'm tired of living with the guilt, and because these young people—" He gestured toward Lydia and Rowan. "They risked everything for truth. The least I can do is support them with my testimony." "Even knowing it will likely result in your own imprisonment?" "Especially knowing that. Some debts can only be paid one way." The trial dragged on for another week. Expert witnesses, handwriting analysts, bank officials who confirmed the money trail. Each day, the evidence mounted higher, and Edward's defense crumbled further. Pemberton had already pleaded guilty in exchange for a lighter sentence, turning on his co-conspirators with the same ruthlessness he'd shown in creating the conspiracy. He testified for 3 days, detailing every crime, every cover-up, every victim. The others fell like dominoes. Sir Richard Ashford, 3 junior ministers whose names Lydia had never heard, a general who'd helped with the military contracts, each one trying to minimize their own role, each one confirming the overall scheme. By the end of the second week, there was no doubt left. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. A formality, really. Everyone knew what the verdict would be. Guilty on all counts. Edward stood as the foreman read out the charges. Embezzlement, conspiracy, fraud, obstruction of justice. Each guilty landed like a hammer blow. His face remained composed, but his hands shook. "Does the defendant wish to make a statement before sentencing?" the judge asked. Edward was silent for a long moment. Then he turned, looked directly at Lydia. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice carried across the silent courtroom. "I told myself I was protecting you, protecting the family. But the truth is, I was protecting myself. My pride, my position, my comfort. I became exactly what I despised, someone who valued power over principle. You were right to expose me. I just wish—" His voice broke. "I wish I'd been strong enough to do it myself." It wasn't enough, couldn't be enough. But it was something. The judge sentenced him to 15 years, Morrison got 10, Pemberton got 12. The others received varying terms, none less than 7 years. Outside the courthouse, the crowd was enormous. Thousands of people, all waiting to see what happened, all wanting to be part of this moment. When Lydia emerged with Rowan and Charlotte, a roar went up. Cheering, applause, people shouting their names.
"They're treating you like heroes," Charlotte observed. "We're not heroes. We just did what needed doing." "That's what heroes are, you idiot. People who do what needs doing when everyone else won't." Reporters swarmed, shouting questions. Lydia tried to answer a few, but there were too many, the crowd too loud. Then Rowan's hand was on her elbow, guiding her through the press to a waiting carriage. They climbed in, and suddenly the noise was muffled, distant. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Anywhere," Rowan said. "Just drive." They went through London at random, watching the city pass outside the windows. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Lydia broke the silence. "What happens now?" "I don't know. I've spent 5 years planning for this moment, and now that it's here, I have no idea what comes next." "Your title could be restored."
The Prime Minister suggested as much, that if you wanted, you could petition for reinstatement. Do I want that? I'm not sure. The title never meant much to me anyway. Just a word people used, a box they put me in. What did mean something? He looked at her. You, this, what we built together, that meant something. Lydia felt her throat tighten. Past tense? No. Present. Future. Whatever tense covers, I don't want to stop. Stop what? This. Us. Fighting for things that matter with someone who actually gives a damn about more than appearances. He took her hand. I know you've lost everything. Your position, your reputation, probably your inheritance once Edward's assets are seized. But if you'd consider, if you'd want, are you asking me something? I'm trying to. I'm not good at this. He took a breath. Marry me. Not because it's proper or expected, or because we need to salvage your reputation. Marry me because I can't imagine doing any of this without you. Because you're the best person I've ever known. Because, yes. Because I love you. And wait, yes? Yes, obviously yes. Lydia was laughing and crying at the same time. You think I risked everything for justice alone? I did it for you, you idiot. Because I couldn't stand the idea of a world where you didn't get vindicated. Because I... She stopped, suddenly shy. Because you what? Because I love you too. Have since that night in the park when you told me the truth and trusted me to believe it. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the desperate, frightened kisses they'd shared before. This was relief and promise, and the beginning of something neither had quite believed was possible. When they finally broke apart, Charlotte was grinning at them from the opposite seat. About time. I was beginning to think you'd both be too noble to admit it. How long have you been there? Lydia asked. The entire time. This is my carriage, remember? Where exactly did you think I went? She rapped on the ceiling. Driver, take us to my house. These two need somewhere to stay that isn't a hotel or a hunting lodge or someone's cellar. Charlotte, we can't impose. You can, and you will. Besides, we need to plan a wedding. A proper one, with enough scandal to make society clutch its pearls, but enough legitimacy that no one can dismiss it. Her eyes sparkled. I'm thinking St. James's, full ceremony, every newspaper invited. Let them see that love and justice won. That sounds exhausting, Rowan said. It will be, but it'll also be spectacular. Charlotte leaned forward. You two just took on the most powerful men in England and won. You think a society wedding is beyond you? Fair point. They spent the next month preparing. The engagement announcement in the Times caused exactly the scandal Charlotte had predicted. Society divided between those who thought it romantic and those who considered it vulgar. Lydia received death threats and love letters in equal measure. Rowan was invited to speak at universities about corruption and reform, suddenly transformed from disgraced exile to celebrated crusader. The Prime Minister formally apologized to Rowan and offered full restoration of his title and properties. Rowan accepted the apology but declined the title. I don't need it, he told Lord Grayson in a private meeting Lydia attended. The title didn't protect me when I needed it, and I don't need its protection now. Let it pass to whoever's next in line. I'll make my own way. A noble sentiment, though that makes you the first man in English history to voluntarily refuse a dukedom. Then I'll be a historical footnote. I can live with that. What he couldn't refuse was the official pardon, the clearing of his record, the public acknowledgement that he'd been wronged. That mattered, not for his pride, but because it meant Thomas Brennan's death was formally recognized as murder rather than accident. It meant the system had admitted fault. Small victory, but real. Sarah Brennan attended the wedding. She stood in the back of St. James's, wearing black still, her face solemn. But when Lydia caught her eye, Sarah nodded once. Acknowledgement, gratitude. The beginning of something like peace. The ceremony was everything Charlotte had promised, beautiful and scandalous in equal measure. Half of society attended, the other half boycotted, but read about it obsessively in the papers. Lydia wore white silk that Charlotte had commissioned, simple and elegant, nothing like the elaborate confections most brides chose. She walked down the aisle alone, no father to give her away, no brother to stand in his place. She gave herself. That felt right. Rowan waited at the altar looking stunned, like he couldn't quite believe this was real. When she reached him, he whispered, "Last chance to run." Too late. You're stuck with me now. Thank heaven for that. The vows were traditional but felt radical when spoken by two people who'd fought so hard to reach this moment. When the priest pronounced them married, the church erupted in applause. Some scandalized that such common behavior was occurring in St. James's, others too moved to care about propriety. They walked out into London's sunshine as husband and wife, and the crowd outside was huge. Thousands of people cheering and waving, many holding signs that said things like "Justice and Love" and "The People's Duke." "You're not a duke anymore," Lydia reminded Rowan. "Tell them that." They couldn't. Somehow, in the public imagination, Rowan had become a symbol. The wronged man who fought back, who exposed corruption, who proved that truth could defeat power. It didn't matter that he'd refused the title. People needed heroes, needed to believe that courage mattered. So they played the part, waved to the crowds, smiled for the photographers, gave interviews about reform and justice and the importance of holding powerful people accountable. But in private, in the small house they'd rented in an unfashionable part of London, they were just themselves. Just Lydia and Rowan learning how to be married, how to be happy, how to live without the constant pressure of survival. It wasn't always easy. Lydia had nightmares about the violence they'd witnessed, about the man she'd shot in Whitechapel. Rowan still struggled with anger, with the 5 years he'd lost, with guilt over Thomas Brennan's death. They helped each other through it, learned that healing wasn't smooth or quick or simple, that some scars never fully faded. But they were healing, together. 6 months after the wedding, Lydia received a letter. She recognized the handwriting immediately, Edward's careful script, unchanged by imprisonment. She almost threw it away. Almost. Instead, she opened it. "Lydia, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I'm using my time here to think about what I did, why I did it, how I justified it to myself for so long. The truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of being ordinary, of losing our position, of being forgotten. That fear made me cruel, made me willing to destroy anyone who threatened what I'd built, including you. Especially you, actually. Because you represented everything I'd lost. the ability to choose principle over comfort, to risk everything for what's right. I hated you for that, and that hate nearly destroyed us both. I'm working with investigators now, helping them uncover other corruption schemes, other places where money gets stolen and people get hurt. It's the least I can do. Maybe the only good thing I can do from here. I don't ask for your forgiveness. Just want you to know that you were right about everything. And I'm proud of you, even though I have no right to be. Your brother, Edward Lydia, read it twice, then showed it to Rowan. What do you think? She asked. I think he means it. Whether that matters is up to you. She thought about it for a long time. About forgiveness, about family, about whether people could really change or if they just learned to live with what they'd done. Finally, she wrote back. A short letter, nothing elaborate. Told Edward she hoped he found peace, that she was building a life she believed in, that maybe someday they could talk again, but not yet. She didn't know if that was forgiveness, but it felt like freedom. A year after the trial, Rowan was offered a position with the newly created Anti-Corruption Commission, a government body formed specifically to investigate fraud and abuse in public office. He accepted on the condition that Lydia work with him. You're better at this than I am, he told her. You see connections I miss, and people trust you in a way they don't trust me. They trust you plenty. They trust the story of me. They trust you as a person. There's a difference. So they became investigators, officially this time. Spent their days uncovering schemes and exposing corruption and making powerful people very uncomfortable. It wasn't always successful. Some cases fell apart, some guilty people walked free, some reforms got watered down until they were meaningless. But some didn't. Some cases ended in convictions, in real change, in systems being forced to work the way they were supposed to. Small victories, but they added up. Charlotte visited often, full of gossip and advice, and increasingly pointed questions about when they were planning to have children. We're busy, Lydia told her. You're always busy. Life doesn't wait for convenient timing. Life also doesn't require following social timelines. Thank heaven for that. Otherwise, you'd have been married off to some boring lord years ago, and we'd never have had this adventure. You call this an adventure? What else would you call it? You destroyed the most powerful conspiracy in England, married a disgraced duke, and became the most fascinating woman in London. If that's not adventure, I don't know what is. Lydia laughed. When you put it that way, I always put it that way. That's my gift, making people see how remarkable their lives are. 2 years after the trial, Parliament passed the Public Accountability Act, establishing new oversight mechanisms and whistleblower protections. It wasn't perfect, no law ever was, but it was something. A step toward a system where people like Thomas Brennan wouldn't have to choose between speaking truth and staying alive. At the bill signing, the Prime Minister invited Lydia and Rowan to attend. This wouldn't exist without you, Lord Grayson said. Your investigation, your courage, your refusal to accept easy answers, that changed everything, made it impossible to ignore the rot. We just followed the evidence, Rowan said. No. You risked everything to follow the evidence when everyone else was looking away. That's not just investigation, that's heroism. We're not heroes. History will decide that, but for what it's worth, I think you are. He shook both their hands. Thank you. From a grateful nation. Walking out of Parliament afterward, Lydia thought about that night at the Ashford ball, when Rowan had first walked in and everything had changed. Thought about how terrified she'd been, how certain that the truth would destroy her. It had. Just not in the way she'd feared. The truth had destroyed the comfortable lies she'd been living, the safe small life she'd been settling for. But in destroying that, it had built something better. A life where she mattered, where her choices had consequences, where courage and principle weren't just abstract values but daily practices, a life worth living. What are you thinking about? Rowan asked, watching her face. How far we've come. How different everything is now. Is it better? It's harder, more complicated, more frightening sometimes. She looked at him, this man she'd fought beside and fallen in love with and chosen over everything else. But yes, it's better. Good, because I don't think I could go back even if I wanted to. Neither could I. They walked through London together, just another couple among thousands, unremarkable except for what they'd done and what they represented. Some people recognized them, pointed, whispered, occasionally approached for a word or a handshake. Most didn't. It was perfect. That evening, back in their small house with its second-hand furniture and overflowing bookshelves, Lydia stood at the window watching the city settle into night. Behind her, she heard Rowan moving around, making tea, humming something off-key. She thought about Edward in prison, working to undo some of the damage he'd done. About Charlotte hosting another one of her famous dinner parties where scandal and respectability mingled freely. About Sarah Brennan, who'd written to say she was opening a school for poor children in her brother's name. About all the lives that had been changed by one decision to ask difficult questions. "Rowan?" she called. "Yes?" "What do we investigate next?" She heard him laugh. "Already thinking about the next case?" "Why not? There's plenty of corruption left to expose." "That there is." He appeared in the doorway, 2 cups of tea in hand, that half-smile she loved so much on his face. "What did you have in mind?" "I heard something about irregularities in the prison system, contractors charging for supplies that never arrive, conditions worse than the law requires. Thought it might be worth looking into." "We just finished one major investigation. So we're experienced now. We're exhausted now." "That too. But we're also good at this, and people are counting on someone to care about these things." She took the tea he offered. "Someone has to stand up. Might as well be us." Rowan shook his head, but he was smiling. "You're relentless. I learned from the best." "I'm serious, though. We should rest. Take time to just be together without conspiracies and threats and constant danger." "We will. After this next case." "You said that last time." "And I meant it last time, too." She kissed him softly. "I'm not saying we investigate forever. Just that right now, while we can, we should. Because there are Thomas Brennans everywhere. People who see wrong and want to speak up but don't know how, don't have the resources, don't have the protection. We can be that protection. We can make sure their voices get heard." "That's a heavy responsibility." "Yes, but we've carried heavy responsibilities before. We can do it again." Rowan was quiet for a moment, studying her face in the lamplight. Then he nodded. "All right, the prison system investigation. We'll start looking into it next week." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. You're right. Someone has to do this work. Might as well be people who've already survived the worst they can throw at us." They stood together at the window, watching London breathe and shift and live. Somewhere in this vast city, someone was being wronged, someone was stealing, someone was abusing power. And somewhere, someone was noticing, questioning, preparing to fight back. The work would never be finished. There would always be another case, another conspiracy, another person who needed help that no one else would provide. But that was all right, because Lydia and Rowan weren't looking for an ending anymore. They were looking for purpose, for meaning, for the daily choice to stand up when it would be easier to look away. And they'd found it, not in grand gestures or dramatic moments, but in the quiet determination to keep going, to keep fighting, to keep believing that truth mattered even when it cost everything. The storm they'd weathered hadn't destroyed them. It had forged them into something stronger, not perfect, not invulnerable, but resilient, capable, ready for whatever came next. Together. "I love you," Lydia said quietly. "I love you too." Rowan's arm came around her shoulders. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me when no one else did. For believing in justice when it seemed impossible. For being stubborn and brave and willing to risk everything for what's right." He kissed the top of her head. "For changing my life." "You changed mine too." "Then we're even." "I don't think that's how it works." "No? Then how does it work?" She smiled. "We just keep changing each other, keep pushing each other to be better, keep reminding each other why any of this matters. Forever, if we're lucky." "That sounds exhausting." "Probably, but it also sounds like exactly the life I want." Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. Inside, 2 people who'd fought for truth and found love stood together, ready for whatever tomorrow brought. The past was settled. Justice had been served. The guilty were punished, the innocent vindicated. But the future? That was still being written. And Lydia and Rowan held the pen together, ready to fill those pages with all the courage and love and stubborn determination that had brought them this far, ready to keep fighting, keep hoping, keep believing, together, always.